Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a loaf of bread that somehow counts as a love letter, 3 neighbors who refuse to keep their mouths shut, and a goat that witnesses more passion than you'll ever admit to. The market reeks of onions. Your parents are already bartering your heart for livestock, and you haven't even finished your porridge. Romance here isn't private, it's public property, and the entire village has opinions. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. Romance does not arrive in a velvet cloak with roses and poetry, no matter what the minstrels claim. It arrives in the form of your aunt, loudly declaring at the village well that you and the miller's second cousin would make a fine match, provided neither of you freezes solid before Lent. She makes this announcement while brandishing a dripping bucket, and half the village nods in solemn agreement as though she has just read from scripture. You stand there, clutching your own bucket, wondering when your personal life became communal property, and also if this means you must now greet the miller's cousin with a level of familiarity that makes you nervous. He is already staring at you from across the mud, chewing bread like it owes him money. Dating, as you discover, is less about mysterious sparks of attraction and more about strategic survival alliances announced in public spaces. There is no candlelit dinner, only stew eaten from a cracked bowl, while 4 generations of relatives argue over whether your future spouse is clever enough to bargain at market. You sit by the fire, trying to imagine what it would be like to have even a single secret admirer, only to realize that secrets are impossible here. Someone saw you drop a turnip yesterday, and by evening it had been recast as a love token offered to the baker's daughter. She has not spoken to you since, but her mother winked in a way that suggests negotiations are already underway. Your aunt is not the only one with opinions. The local blacksmith, who has known you since you were an infant, pats you on the back and informs you that marriage is like shoeing a horse, messy but necessary. You do not find this metaphor helpful, though you try to look appreciative while he wipes soot onto your sleeve. Meanwhile, the town gossip insists you should marry the shepherd, mostly because she has extra wool she'd like to sell at your wedding. She explains this in front of the shepherd, who blushes so hard he nearly drops a lamb. By the time you return home, you are betrothed to at least 3 people, none of whom you have personally spoken to. The chaos does not end there. Courtship in the Middle Ages is conducted not with longing stares across a ballroom, but with bartered favors and livestock negotiations shouted over the noise of pigs. You might think a flirtatious smile would be enough, but no. Someone's uncle wants to know if you can carry a sack of barley without collapsing, because strength in the fields is sexier than poetry. You try to practice looking mysterious while balancing a basket, but end up stepping into a puddle so deep it could drown a duck. The shepherd's cousin laughs and tells you it's endearing. You are not sure if this is flirting, or if he simply enjoys seeing you wet and muddy. Everyone in the village considers themselves part of your love story, whether you want them to be or not. The baker shoves an extra roll into your hand and whispers that you should offer it to the miller's daughter, because nothing says romance like stale wheat. A child throws a stick at your head, declaring it a love dart from the butcher's son. Even the parish priest, who has sworn to remain detached from worldly affairs, hints in his sermon that pairing off before famine season is wise, lest anyone find themselves without comfort in times of scarcity. You cough loudly, but the entire congregation turns to glance at you and the shepherd at the same time, sealing a rumor you will never undo. At night, you sit by the fire and wonder what it would be like to choose your own partner without half the population weighing in. You imagine locking eyes with someone across a crowded marketplace, both of you suddenly aware of destiny's pull. Instead, Reality offers you the sight of the tanner's apprentice, tripping over a dog and landing face first in mud, followed by your aunt elbowing you and hissing, "He's strong, that one. Good teeth, too." You are fairly certain destiny is not involved. Still, there are moments that almost feel romantic. When you haul water from the well and your sleeve brushes against another's hand, your heart jumps, even if the hand belongs to someone's cousin who smells faintly of fish. When you carry firewood past the fields, you catch sight of a smile thrown your way, and for a moment you feel a warmth that has nothing to do with wool cloaks or heavy fires. But then someone's goat bleats, someone else sneezes, and the spell is broken by the sound of your aunt already telling two neighbors that wedding banns should be read by midsummer. You learn quickly that courtship is less about stolen glances and more about surviving a communal sport. Your choices are debated, like market prices. Every conversation becomes evidence, every glance recorded, every sneeze catalogued as a sign of affection. The sheep know more about your love life than you do. The cows judge silently, chewing cud in slow disapproval. Even the geese, perpetually furious at existence, hiss at anyone who comes too close, as if guarding your honor with their wings. And so you stumble through your days, constantly nudged, whispered about, and paired off like items at a fair. You try to remember if anyone asked what you wanted, but it hardly matters. In the Middle Ages, love does not begin with your heart. It begins with your aunt's bucket of water, spilled words in the public square, and a village ready to write your romance for you, whether you approve or not. You go to bed that night with the faint suspicion that, in this world, the true language of love is not poetry or song, but the loud, relentless chorus of neighbors insisting they know what's best. And tomorrow, without fail, they will begin again. Love does not strike you in candlelit halls or beneath soaring tapestries of knights and ladies. It strikes you in the village square, where a pig is wandering loose again, snuffling around the legs of a cabbage seller. You are carrying a bucket of turnips, the bucket heavier than your arms wish to admit, and you are already muttering prayers that none tumble out and roll away. Of course one does, bouncing cheerfully across the mud like it has an appointment elsewhere. You lunge after it, trip over the pig, and collide with another bucket. This one not of turnips, but of suspiciously cloudy water, balanced in the hands of someone you have never properly seen until now. The water sloshes across your tunic, steaming in the cold air, and you are introduced in a manner less romantic and more aquatic. This is how you first meet the person who will occupy far too many of your thoughts. There are no heavenly choirs, just the grunt of a pig and the laughter of two children who have been following you all day in hopes you might fall into something. You blink, soaked, and see a face looking at you with the kind of startled concern that makes time wobble. Their brow furrows, lips part as though to apologize, but then you sneeze, loudly, because your nose has inhaled both smoke from a nearby fire pit and the faint odor of cabbage. The sneeze echoes across the square, and suddenly half the village is staring. It is important to know that in medieval times, a sneeze is not just a sneeze. It is an omen, a sign, a possible message from the Almighty. People cross themselves. A goose honks in alarm. Someone whispers that you have just declared undying devotion through nasal expression. You want to say that no, you simply have smoke in your sinuses, but the person still staring at you with that startled brow and dripping bucket makes words difficult. Their hand twitches as if they might offer to help, but instead they clutch the bucket tighter, cheeks flushed, as though embarrassed to have been caught participating in what the baker's wife is already calling a romantic baptism. The pig, unimpressed by destiny, nudges your fallen turnip with its snout and begins to chew. The children clap as though this is the highlight of their day. You stand, dripping, trying to appear dignified, despite the mud streaking your knees. Your beloved, though you would never dare to call them that aloud, bites their lip, clearly attempting to hold back laughter. It escapes anyway, a snort that turns into a cough, which they try to disguise as clearing their throat. The sound wraps around you more warmly than the scratchy cloak your aunt insists you wear year-round. From that moment, the village decides something has happened. No one asks you, of course. By evening, the blacksmith claims he saw you lock eyes in the square as if struck by Cupid's hammer. The priest mutters that it is unseemly to sneeze so passionately in public. The gossip at the well declares you will be wed before the leaves turn, and that the dowry negotiations will surely include at least 2 pigs, 1 goat, and a sack of barley. You eat your supper in silence, chewing bread that tastes suspiciously like smoke, and pretend not to hear your younger cousin sing a tuneless song about true love born in puddles. Still, the memory lingers. The way their gaze caught yours, the way your clumsy disaster became a shared absurdity. You tell yourself it means nothing. You tell yourself you will forget. But then you see them again, days later, at church. The candles flicker, the air thick with incense that mixes unkindly with the lingering smell of sheep from the man seated beside you. You bow your head, whisper a prayer, and when you glance up, you catch their profile across the aisle. They are trying to stifle another laugh, this time not at you, but at the priest's unintentional mispronunciation of psalm as salmon. You bite the inside of your cheek, but the smile creeps out anyway. And in that moment, the entire church seems brighter, though perhaps that is just the smoke stinging your eyes again. Love at first sight, in your world, is not a thunderbolt. It is mud on your boots, pigs chewing your produce, and a sneeze so loud it reverberates through gossip for weeks. It is the warmth that blooms uninvited when you catch someone looking at you not as a bargaining chip or a dowry sum, but as a fellow human who just slipped in manure and lived to laugh about it. It is messy and inconvenient, and smells faintly of turnips, yet it nestles into your chest all the same. And so, when you walk through the square again and hear the villagers whisper, you keep your head high. Yes, you tripped over a pig. Yes, you sneezed like an omen from the heavens. Yes, half your turnips are gone. But in the corner of the square stands someone with a bucket, someone whose eyes keep flicking toward you before darting away again, and for the first time, you begin to think that maybe your aunt's endless matchmaking proclamations might not be entirely ridiculous after all. Your parents have been planning your love life since before you had teeth, and now that you are technically old enough to be considered useful in the fields and sturdy enough to haul firewood without collapsing, the planning has intensified. Romance, to them, is not a matter of hearts or stolen glances. It is a ledger to be balanced, a negotiation to be whispered over ale mugs, a chessboard where you are the piece traded for goats, grain, and the vague promise of family alliances. Every time you so much as look at someone too long, your mother narrows her eyes, and your father mutters about the acreage attached to their family name. You learn quickly that your heart is less an organ and more a bargaining chip. It begins innocently enough when you confess, in a moment of weakness, that you might have noticed someone smile while fetching water. Your mother nods sagely, immediately calculating whether their family's plot of land would increase your winter barley yield. She asks not about the person's kindness or wit, but whether their uncle's gout might make them an unreliable ally. Your father scratches his chin and says it is a pity they have only 1 cow, and you realize your attempt at romance has been converted into a livestock assessment before you even finished your bread. That night, they argue about the practical value of a single healthy cow versus the moral character of a family that once borrowed your grandfather's rake and returned it slightly bent. By morning, the entire village seems to know. You walk to the market, and 3 neighbors nod approvingly at you, one even winking. Someone slips you an onion for the wedding stew, though you had not proposed, nor even properly spoken to your supposed beloved. This is how swiftly your parents' whispers spread, riding on the wind of gossip like sparks leaping from a fire. You stand in the square, onion in hand, and consider how strange it is that your heart is already being harvested like an early turnip crop. Parents in these times do not merely oversee your affections. They patrol them like guards at a fortress. If you linger too long near the mill, your mother appears suddenly, as though conjured, asking pointed questions about whether the miller's daughter truly knows how to spin wool, because last she heard, her stitches were uneven. If you laugh at a joke told by the blacksmith's son, your father coughs loudly and warns you that ironmongers are notoriously stingy with their ale, a trait that would surely poison a marriage. Even your grandmother gets involved, recounting how, in her day, women picked husbands based on the quality of their chicken coops, and perhaps you should reconsider your standards before you end up with nothing but a broken fence and a sack of moldy peas. Romantic privacy is impossible. Once, you dared to meet someone by the well at dusk, a perfectly innocent conversation about weather and sheep. By dawn, the story had reached your parents, transformed into a dramatic tale of midnight trysts, and your father greeted you with a lecture about how no one marries for sheep alone. He then began a lengthy negotiation strategy about whether an extra acre of grazing land could be wrung out of the arrangement, while your mother nodded along, already envisioning grandchildren with strong arms and reliable scythes. You try to protest that the conversation was merely about rainfall, but they dismiss your protests as youthful nonsense, for everyone knows that water and sheep are the secret code words for marriage. The strangest part is how casually they weigh your worth. They do not mean to be cruel. They simply see the world in measures of survival, not sentiment. They tally your skills, your potential dowry, your usefulness in the fields, and calculate what sort of match you can fetch, as though you are a prized, yet slightly dented cooking pot. When you ask timidly about marrying for love, your mother laughs until she coughs, and your father pats your shoulder as if you've made a charming but impossible joke. Love is a fine thing, he says, but it won't keep the pigs fed. You nod, though inside you wish desperately for a world where pigs could feed themselves and hearts mattered more than hay. Even when your parents attempt romance on your behalf, it arrives awkwardly. They insist you attend a neighbor's feast, nudging you toward the farmer's daughter as though steering a wayward cart. She sits silently, staring into her broth, while your mother elbows you to say something clever. You mutter about the weather. Your father coughs and declares that a union between families would double the pig count, which, to him, is the highest form of poetry. The girl's father smiles approvingly, and suddenly you are trapped in a conversation about pig manure that everyone else interprets as a courtship dance. Later, you trudge home in silence, your parents beaming as though they have orchestrated a masterpiece, while you wonder how manure became your love language. Your peers suffer the same fate. You hear tales of boys traded like sacks of barley for alliances with neighboring villages, of girls promised away before they even knew how to churn butter. One friend confides that he had a crush on the baker's niece, but his parents forbid it because her family kneaded their dough with too much arrogance. Another weeps because she loved a shepherd, but her father insisted she marry a man with a better roof. For what is passion if your bed drips rain all winter? And so you begin to understand that in this world, love is not blind. It is bartered. It is measured in goats, in land, in the sturdiness of roofs, and the reliability of barley harvests. Your parents loom over your affections like gatekeepers, transforming every flutter of your heart into an inventory of assets and liabilities. You dream of a romance that is yours alone, unshaped by their hands, unpriced by their calculations. Yet when you wake each morning to the sound of their voices debating the value of potential in-laws, you know the truth. Your love life belongs not to you, but to them, and to the village, and to the relentless arithmetic of survival that turns hearts into coin. Still, in stolen moments, you cling to something quieter, the memory of a laugh in church, the warmth of a shared glance in the market, the way your heart can still beat faster despite every calculation stacked against it. Your parents may barter, the village may gossip, the ledger may rule, but deep inside you, love stirs like a stubborn flame, refusing to be traded away. You discover very quickly that love in your village is not a matter of roses and whispered verses, but a matter of arithmetic, livestock, and whether your family has a cauldron without too many holes. Every time someone so much as suggests your name alongside another, the conversation that follows is not about compatibility or affection, but about what exactly you can bring to the table. Not metaphorically, but literally. What table? How sturdy is it? And does it collapse under the weight of turnips? Your mother polishes her hands on her apron and announces that you are worth at least 2 geese and an acre, possibly 3 geese if the buyer, sorry suitor, squints generously. Your father interrupts, insisting that the acre is the true prize, because geese are noisy, and a single field of barley feeds more mouths than all the honking birds in Christendom. You sit quietly, feeling less like a child of flesh and blood, and more like a ledger entry in the family accounts. The bargaining starts even before romance has begun. If you so much as blush at the miller's son, someone's uncle asks whether your dowry includes a usable plow. If you happen to stand near the shepherd's daughter for longer than 10 heartbeats, the entire village begins speculating about whether her family's 3 sheep are fat enough to balance your family's underwhelming collection of dented cookware. A dented cauldron is passed down like a hereditary flaw. Everyone knows about it, everyone remembers who broke it, and everyone pretends it still boils stew, evenly though, in truth, it burns half and leaves the other half raw. Each time marriage negotiations are hinted at, someone always brings up the cauldron, sighing loudly, as if it were a permanent stain upon your romantic prospects. The real nightmare begins when the chickens enter the discussion. Chickens are currency in your world, and they die inconveniently, in ways that ruin even the best-laid wedding talks. A promising match once withered when your family promised 2 hens, only for both to perish the night before, in what was politely referred to as an unfortunate candle accident. The smell lingered for weeks. The next morning, your parents trudged to the negotiations with nothing but a sheepish expression and the charred remains of feathers. Your intended's family was not amused. Love, it seems, can survive mud, manure, and gossip, but not dead chickens. Then there are the donkeys. Everyone knows the value of a donkey cannot be overstated. A good donkey means harvests brought in before the rains, firewood hauled without breaking spines, water carried with fewer complaints. A bad donkey, however, is a nightmare. Stubborn, spiteful, inclined to bite, and loudly braying at midnight when the village would rather be asleep. Your parents argue endlessly over whether you are worth a first-class donkey or merely the second-best one, the animal whose left ear droops and who occasionally collapses in the road for no reason at all. The distinction is crucial, for no one wants to tie their family to a household that only offers a donkey who sulks in puddles. You wish, just once, the discussions could be about whether you and your beloved enjoy the same songs, or whether you both laugh at the same clumsy sheep. But no. Instead it is, how many sacks of grain, how many jars of honey, how many goats, and for heaven's sake will the goats stop eating the laundry before they are counted. One evening, as you overhear your parents and the blacksmith debating whether a small patch of turnip field adds sufficient value to your hand, you realize passion is irrelevant when stacked against tubers. The blacksmith leans forward, nodding gravely, and says that turnips rot quickly, while pigs are sturdier investments. Your father grumbles but concedes the point. You stir your stew and wonder if any troubadour would dare sing about lovers torn apart by root vegetables. Sometimes the negotiations turn surreal. A neighbor once tried to sweeten a marriage bargain with an elderly goose that had not laid an egg in 2 years and bit children on sight. Another promised a small plot of land that turned out to be a swamp, complete with mosquitoes the size of your thumb. And always, hovering over the conversation, is the silent pressure of reputation. If your dowry is too small, you risk being whispered about for decades. Your name a cautionary tale about stingy matches. If your dowry is too extravagant, you risk being mocked for overpaying in the great market of matrimony. Love is never free. It is weighed, haggled, and measured until it is as bruised as the apples sold cheap at the end of the fair. And yet, in the middle of these endless calculations, You sometimes lock eyes with the person who has become the center of your quiet thoughts. You see them standing behind their parents, shuffling their feet, looking as weary of the bartering as you are. Their cheeks flush when someone mentions the second best donkey, and they glance at you with a wry smile that suggests you are both prisoners in the same absurd play. For a moment, the goats, the acres, the dented cauldron, all of it fades, and you are just two souls caught in the crossfire of generations who believe survival is the only true romance. The moment is brief, interrupted by a loud cough, and the fresh arrival of a neighbor determined to argue about whether the geese should be delivered alive or already plucked, but it lingers in your chest like an ember refusing to die. So you endure the negotiations, the dead chickens, the endless debates about donkeys and dented pots. You nod when told you are worth precisely 3 sheep and half a pig, though you wonder how one divides a pig in matters of love. You smile politely when someone jokes that the second best donkey will keep you humble, though inside you ache for something freer, less transactional. And in the quiet of night, when the house is still and only the distant hoot of an owl keeps you company, you let yourself imagine a world where you could marry for laughter, or for kindness, or for the way your beloved's eyes caught the firelight. But morning always comes, and with it the reminders that in your world, hearts are priced like livestock, and nothing kills passion faster than a bargaining table cluttered with feathers, mud, and a donkey no one truly wants. You quickly learn that there is no such thing as privacy when it comes to matters of the heart. Every glance, every awkward smile, every unfortunate stumble is seized upon by the village and reinterpreted into an epic tale of romance, scandal, or both. You might think you are capable of walking through the market without incident, but the moment your eyes meet someone's for half a heartbeat too long, 3 people nod knowingly, 2 start whispering, and by sundown, the blacksmith's wife swears she saw you exchange vows beside the carrot stall. You would deny it, but it hardly matters. The story is already louder than your protest, and besides, the carrot seller is telling everyone that she personally provided the bouquet. It is worse near the well, the epicenter of all rumors, where buckets clang, water sloshes, and secrets are ladled out as generously as the water itself. You sneeze once. A perfectly normal sneeze brought on by dust and the faint odor of damp hay. And suddenly half the village decides you sneeze directly into a binding promise. Someone claims the sneeze was an omen, someone else swears it sounded like your beloved's name, and before you know it, you are congratulated on an engagement you never actually agreed to. The well becomes less a place to quench thirst and more a stage where your respiratory system dictates the trajectory of your romantic future. Festivals are no better. You might hope that dancing around the maypole or juggling apples at the harvest fair would be innocent distractions, but instead they become public displays of desire dissected by onlookers with the precision of surgeons. If you dance a little too close to someone, the entire village hums like a hive, buzzing about the undeniable connection. If you laugh too loudly at a poorly timed joke, the baker's apprentice insists that you are clearly smitten, while the butcher claims he heard wedding bells already. Even when you trip over your own feet, which is often, it is recast as a romantic stumble, proof that love has you dizzy. You want to tell them you were simply clumsy, but in this village, clumsiness and courtship are indistinguishable. The children, of course, are the worst. They trail you everywhere, eager to catch a glimpse of anything they can shout across the square. A simple exchange of bread for coins is turned into a serenade, a moment of shared laughter exaggerated into a scene of passion. They chase you with sticks, calling them love arrows, and when you swat them away, they shriek that you are denying Cupid. You once made the mistake of helping someone carry firewood, and by evening, every child was singing a tuneless ballad about your impending marriage, complete with sound effects imitating goats. The next day, you considered wearing a disguise, but the children would know your sneeze anywhere. Even the animals seem involved. The geese honk disapprovingly if you stand too close to someone. The cows blink slowly, as if judging your choices, and the sheep bleat loudly enough to drown out attempts at subtlety. A goat once rammed you directly into another person, and before you could extricate yourself from the tangle of limbs and hay, someone shouted, "They've embraced." That embrace was retold at least 15 times before supper, and by the time the story reached the tavern, you were said to have kissed passionately beneath the watchful moon. In truth, you had hay in your mouth and a bruise on your shin. The church offers no reprieve. You think perhaps prayer will shield you, but even kneeling at the altar becomes fodder for speculation. When you glance sideways during the sermon, 3 women nudge each other, whispering about how tenderly you look at your chosen one. The priest coughs, adjusts his robes, and preaches about the sanctity of marriage, glancing pointedly in your direction. You bow your head and try to disappear into the pew, but disappearing is impossible here. You are always on stage, your smallest gestures magnified into declarations of undying love. Worse still are the feasts, where public courtship rituals reach their peak. If you sit beside someone, the entire table roars with delight, clapping as though you've just exchanged vows. If you accidentally touch hands while reaching for bread, the hall erupts in knowing laughter, mugs clanking in approval. You flush crimson, wishing desperately that you had longer arms, while the person beside you hides their smile in a cup of mead. Later, when you rise to fetch more stew, the crowd chants your names together, weaving them into a crude rhyme that will haunt you for weeks. Love songs may be sung by minstrels, but here, your romance is performed by the collective noise of neighbors, whether you like it or not. And so, your days unfold like a play you never auditioned for. Every act narrated by a chorus of villagers who insist they know your heart better than you do. You try to walk casually, speak carefully, even breathe discreetly, but it makes no difference. To them, you are already a character in a sprawling love story, one in which pigs, geese, and gossipers have as much influence as your own feelings. You go to bed exhausted, not from labor in the fields, but from the effort of carrying an entire village's expectations on your shoulders. Yet in the quiet of night, when no one is watching, you allow yourself to smile, because somewhere between the laughter, the sneezes, and the endless public commentary, there is truth. You did look across the market and see someone whose gaze lingered. You did stumble near the well and find their hand reaching out to steady you. The village may shout, invent, and exaggerate, but beneath all the noise, there is something softer, something only you and they truly understand, even if everyone else insists on turning it into a festival. Church is supposed to be a place of solemnity, repentance, and murmured prayers. Yet for you it becomes the battlefield, where every tiny flicker of romance is crushed beneath sermons and the unblinking eyes of saints painted on the walls. You shuffle into the pews each week, trying to sit far enough away from the person who occupies your thoughts, but not so far that the absence looks suspicious. Inevitably, the priest drones on about the dangers of lust, his voice echoing off the cold stone, while you stare at the back of your beloved's head and wonder if admiring the curl of hair on their neck is a mortal sin. Judging by the priest's tone, it is, according to him, nearly everything is. You are told constantly that your body is a vessel, which makes you feel less like a human and more like a lopsided clay jug. The sermons are filled with warnings that so much as brushing hands outside marriage will invite eternal damnation, plagues, or at the very least, a bad harvest. Once, in a daring moment, your fingers brushed against another's while passing a hymn sheet. The touch lasted perhaps a second, yet it felt like fire, like thunder, like poetry itself. You went home that night glowing, convinced you had experienced something extraordinary, until your mother caught you smiling into your porridge and snapped that you looked possessed. By the following Sunday, the priest had launched into a tirade about the dangers of idle fingers, and you were certain the entire congregation was staring at you. The church itself seems designed to make romance impossible. Candles flicker in shadows that make you feel guilty for even breathing too close to someone. Incense curls through the air, thick enough to choke the giddiness out of you. The pews creak with the weight of watching eyes, each sound punctuating your shame whenever you dare to glance sideways. Above you, the painted saints peer down, stern and expressionless, as if they too disapprove of your wayward thoughts. You try to focus on the scripture, but the words blur into dire warnings about fire and temptation, which only makes the memory of that fleeting touch grow more vivid. The priest himself is a constant obstacle, a man who seems to believe that love exists only in heaven and certainly not between muddy-faced villagers who have the audacity to smile at each other during Mass. He points a bony finger, railing against the dangers of lust, his voice rising to a fevered pitch, as if someone, somewhere, is holding hands beneath the pews. His gaze sweeps over the congregation, and you shrink down, convinced he can see straight into your mind, where the forbidden kiss you imagine daily glows like a sinful torch. When he warns that temptation leads to ruin, you are fairly certain he is speaking directly to you, though in truth he has been repeating the same sermon for the last 10 years. There are rules, endless rules, all designed to suffocate even the smallest bloom of affection. No kissing, of course, unless bound by vows. No embraces that last longer than courtesy demands. No dancing too closely at festivals. No lingering in corners. No whispering in shadows. Even a glance held too long is cause for suspicion, because surely eyes that linger are eyes planning sin. It is exhausting to navigate, and yet you find yourself constantly skirting the edges, because what is the point of living if you cannot feel your heart race when another smiles at you? You are told that chastity is purity, that desire is dangerous, that the only safe love is the love you pour into your prayers. But your prayers, if you are honest, are mostly about surviving another day of fieldwork and, occasionally, about what it would be like to kiss someone without the entire village collapsing in horror. And then comes the poetry. A single kiss, stolen in secret, can inspire entire ballads. Troubadours, those meddling bards with their lutes and their exaggerated rhymes, will craft songs about two lovers who barely grazed lips in a hayloft before fleeing at the sound of approaching footsteps. The song will spread faster than fire, sung in taverns, repeated at markets, until the supposed lovers cannot so much as buy onions without hearing their own tale sung back at them. You envy those songs and dread them at the same time. They make kissing sound like a holy act, yet the consequences of being caught would be anything but holy. A single kiss can elevate you into legend or drag you straight into confession, where you will mumble apologies while the priest sighs as if you've single-handedly doomed the entire village. And still, despite the weight of sermons and the ever-present threat of eternal damnation, you crave those small rebellions. A glance held a little longer than it should be. A smile exchanged when no one is looking. A moment when your shoulders brush in the crowded pews and neither of you pulls away. These become treasures, more precious than gold, more thrilling than any feast. You clutch them in your memory, polishing them like gems, replaying them when you lie awake at night. They are proof that love can survive even under the crushing stone ceiling of the church, even beneath the disapproving eyes of saints, even in the shadow of eternal punishment. One evening, after Mass, you linger too long by the door. The cold air rushes in as people file out, and you find yourself standing close enough to someone that your cloak brushes theirs. No words are spoken, but the closeness hums with possibility. Then the priest coughs loudly, and you spring apart like children caught stealing honey. You hurry home, cheeks burning, the fear of hellfire chasing you down the muddy lane. But the memory of that brush of cloaks lingers, sweet and dangerous. You whisper a prayer before bed, not for forgiveness, but for the chance to feel it again. This is the complication of love in your world. Every heartbeat is weighed against sin, every kiss against damnation. Yet the more forbidden it is, the sweeter it becomes. And while priests may thunder, and saints may glare, and mothers may warn, you carry your secret hopes like smuggled treasures, hidden but unyielding. For though they tell you love is peril, you cannot help believing it might also be salvation. You have been told that words can stir the soul, that poetry can capture hearts, that lovers in far-off courts woo one another with verse so beautiful it brings nights to tears. What no one tells you is that parchment is expensive, ink smudges at the worst moments, and your Latin is so questionable that even the local goat looks offended when you practice aloud. Still, you are determined. You cannot serenade without attracting the attention of every gossip within 10 miles. You cannot meet privately without an entire flock of chickens bearing witness. But a letter, yes, a letter might slip past the noise. A letter could be secret. A letter could be yours. You sit at the table with a stub of quill that has been chewed at the end, perhaps by a sibling or perhaps by yourself in moments of boredom. The parchment before you is not fresh but salvaged from the back of an old sermon, the ink stains already blotching one corner. You dip the quill, mutter a prayer that it does not splatter, and begin with what you imagine is proper, carissima mea, which you think means dearest mine, though in truth it may mean expensive furniture. Latin is slippery that way. You hesitate, then pour yourself onto the page with a dramatic flourish you are sure will impress. You write that their eyes are like polished brass kettles, that their laughter reminds you of rain dripping from a leaky roof, and that their presence makes your heart rise like dough left too close to the hearth. By the time you finish, the quill has left ink stains on your fingers, and half the words have suspicious spellings, but you feel triumphant. Surely this is what the troubadours mean by art. Delivering the letter is another trial. You cannot simply hand it to them, not with the entire village ready to interrogate every folded scrap. Instead, you slip it into the hand of a younger cousin, bribing them with half an apple and a promise not to tell. The cousin cackles, announces loudly that they are now a love courier, and sprints away, waving the letter like a victory banner. By the time it reaches your beloved, half the village has seen it, speculated on its contents, and confidently declared it either a confession of sin or a request for extra turnips. When your beloved finally unfolds it, their cheeks flush pink, but not in quite the way you expected. Later, you hear the response. They approach you quietly at the market, eyes wary, and whisper, "Why did you call me slightly damp bread?" You open your mouth to explain that you meant it in a tender way, that bread is life itself, and dampness signifies freshness, but the words crumble in your throat. You had not realized how unfortunate the phrase looked once stripped of your earnest intention. Around you, geese honk, merchants shout, and someone drops a jar of pickles, but all you hear is that quiet, bemused question echoing in your ears. You try again, of course. You cannot let one awkward metaphor doom you. This time you copy phrases you half remember from a wandering minstrel, lines about roses and flames and the moon. Unfortunately, you spell flame as phlegm, and so your second letter reads, "Your beauty is like phlegm upon the hearth, warming all who see it." The goat eats one corner of the parchment before delivery, leaving the phrase truncated to, "Your beauty is like phlegm," which is not at all the effect you hoped for. You find yourself wondering whether love is supposed to feel like constant humiliation wrapped in parchment. Others in the village face the same fate. You hear of a farmer who accidentally wrote his sweetheart a recipe instead of a confession, detailing step by step how to salt pork. She interpreted it as a metaphor for passion and swooned. Another youth attempted to compose a sonnet but forgot the rhymes halfway through, leaving lines like, "Thou art my star, I like pigs." Still, another borrowed lines from a psalm, which would have been moving if he had not misquoted it to describe his beloved as mighty in battle like an ox. The entire congregation giggled when it was discovered. Love letters, it seems, are less a delicate art and more a comedy of errors passed hand to hand until everyone has an opinion. And yet, for all the mistakes and mangled Latin, for all the laughter and the raised eyebrows, you continue. Because when your beloved folds a parchment with care and slips it into their sleeve, even if they later tease you about your bread comparisons, You feel a spark that no sermon, no gossip, no goat can take away. There is something thrilling about sending your heart out into the world disguised as words, even clumsy ones, even words that come back to haunt you in tavern songs. You begin to understand why troubadours thrive on exaggeration and drama, because love, when trapped in ink, demands theater. At night, you reread your drafts by firelight, cringing and smiling at once. You vow to improve, to find better metaphors, to conquer your Latin. You imagine a future where your words are copied, admired, perhaps even sung. And though for now your letters inspire more confusion than admiration, though they cause more laughter than longing, though you sometimes wish you had compared your beloved to anything other than damp bread, you keep writing, because even in your flawed lines, there is truth. And one day, perhaps, when the words come right, they will see what you mean, that your heart, despite its clumsiness, is entirely theirs. Flirtation, you quickly learn, is not an art, but a series of questionable strategies passed down like folk remedies, whispered with the same confidence as cures for gout. No one really knows what works, but everyone insists they do. Your cousin tells you the best way to win a heart is to accidentally fall into someone at the market, preferably while carrying something fragile. Your neighbor swears by the gifting of herbs, though half the time they are weeds yanked hastily from the roadside, their roots still clotted with mud. A traveling minstrel insists that the truest form of courtship is music, though his idea of music is wailing beneath windows until bread crusts are hurled at his head. These are your options. You must choose wisely, or at least survive the embarrassment. The tripping method is common enough that the village square might as well be a stage for constant pratfalls. You try it once, feigning a stumble near the well, hoping your beloved will reach out to steady you. Instead, you collide with a barrel of eels, which overturns spectacularly, sending the creatures writhing across the cobbles. Children shriek with glee. Old women shake their heads, and your beloved laughs so hard they nearly choke on an apple. You crawl away, slick with eel slime, uncertain whether you have advanced romance or simply become part of a new cautionary tale. The next morning, someone paints a crude picture of you holding hands with a fish on the tavern wall, and the laughter lasts until winter. The herbs are no safer. You gather a bundle of what you believe to be wild thyme, tie it with twine, and present it with trembling hands. Your beloved smiles politely, though their brow furrows at the pungent smell. Later you discover you have given them a handful of nettles, which left their palms tingling for hours. On another occasion, you try again with what you are assured is rosemary, only for a passing shepherd to inform you it is merely grass. You begin to suspect that true love is less about the right herbs and more about finding someone patient enough to endure botany gone wrong. Still, the act of handing over green sprigs, however humble, becomes its own ritual, a signal that you have thought of them even while wandering through weeds. And then there is music, the most humiliating of all. You borrow a lute from a wandering minstrel, convinced that a serenade beneath your beloved's window will cement your devotion. You strum awkwardly, fingers fumbling, the strings twanging like angry cats. You attempt a ballad, your voice cracking on every high note, until a shutter creaks open above. For a moment your heart soars, believing they are moved by your bravery. Then, a stale roll arcs through the night air and bounces off your head. Laughter erupts from the darkness, not cruel, but undeniably amused. You slink home clutching the battered lute, cheeks burning, stomach filled with the remains of your bread-based defeat. The next day, you overhear someone humming your off-key tune at the market, and you realize your serenade has already been immortalized as comedy. Flirting is rarely private. Every attempt is witnessed, dissected, and exaggerated. If you dare to compliment someone's tunic, 3 neighbors will repeat it by supper, embellishing until you are said to have praised their entire lineage. If you exchange a smile, children chant rhymes about your secret love, which is neither secret nor particularly subtle. Even silence betrays you. Once you dropped your gaze bashfully, and it was immediately reported as a sign of deep longing, though in truth you were only avoiding a goose. The village thrives on transforming every twitch of your face into evidence of courtship. Still, there are moments when even the clumsiest gestures find their mark. Once, while helping with the harvest, you brushed dust from your beloved's sleeve. It was a small thing, unnoticed by others, but their eyes met yours for a heartbeat too long, and you felt the air crackle. Another time, after presenting them with a dubious sprig of mint, they laughed, but tucked it into their belt nonetheless, wearing it all afternoon until the leaves wilted. Even the serenade, disastrous as it was, left a trace of tenderness, for you later glimpsed your beloved humming softly when they thought no one was listening. You begin to understand that medieval flirting is not about elegance, but persistence, about trying and failing, and trying again until the message seeps through the chaos. The stumbles, the weeds, the off-key songs. They are ridiculous, yes, but they are also brave in their own clumsy way. For in a world where love is bargained in goats and whispered about in sermons, these gestures are the few things that belong only to you. They are your rebellion, your declaration, your way of saying what cannot be spoken outright. So you trip, you gift, you sing. You risk humiliation again and again, because sometimes your beloved smiles despite the eels, despite the nettles, despite the stale bread. And in those smiles, fleeting but unmistakable, you find proof that your fumbling efforts are understood, perhaps even cherished. And though the village may laugh, and goats may bleat, and geese may hiss disapproval, you know that somewhere between the stumbles and the sour notes, something real has begun to grow. The old women at the well are the true rulers of your village, though no crown rests on their heads and no scepter gleams in their hands. They sit on worn benches with shawls pulled tight, buckets at their feet, and tongues sharper than any blacksmith's blade. They claim to fetch water, but their real occupation is sorting and shaping the lives of everyone around them, particularly in matters of love. A cough overheard becomes a declaration of longing. A smile glimpsed at the market turns into a binding promise. A casual wave is transformed into wedding plans before you've even reached your front door. By the time you return with your bucket full, the elders have already rewritten your future twice and paired you with 3 different people, just to keep options open. You dread walking past them, because they see everything. Their eyes are small and sharp, missing nothing, like sparrows hunting crumbs. If your step quickens when someone happens to pass by, they nod knowingly, whispering to each other about young passion. If your step slows, they mutter about lingering desire. Even tripping on a stone is interpreted as weak knees brought on by the sight of love. You once sneezed while a neighbor's daughter happened to be near, and for weeks afterward, you were congratulated on your forthcoming marriage. When you tried to protest, the women at the well wagged their fingers, saying that fate is not to be denied. A sneeze, they explained, is heaven's way of marking destiny. You now avoid sneezing in public, though the hay and smoke of everyday life make it nearly impossible. Their gossip travels faster than carts on dry roads. By midday, they know who smiled at whom, who lingered too long at the apple stall, who borrowed a jug from whose family. They embellish freely, never letting facts spoil a good story. A single polite nod becomes a flirtation. A polite greeting becomes a whispered confession. They speak with such confidence that even you begin to doubt your own intentions. Did you mean more when you handed over that sprig of herbs? Was there some hidden passion in the way you asked after the weather? According to the elders, yes. According to you, you were simply being polite. But no one listens to your version. And it is not only you. Everyone is a target. The baker's son cannot deliver loaves without being declared besotted. The shepherd's daughter cannot look up from her flock without being accused of pining. Even the priest is not immune, his stern frowns interpreted as the heavy burden of secret longing. Nothing escapes the women at the well. They weave tapestries of romance out of thin air, threads of rumor binding together names that were never spoken side by side. Once, they arranged an entire betrothal between two families who, when informed, both denied ever having met. Their protests made no difference. For months afterward, the village spoke of their tragic falling out. Their meddling takes on ritual form. They lean together, whispering, cackling, stirring their buckets with unnecessary vigor, as if the water itself needs to hear the news. When you walk past, they call you over, demand to know where you are going, who you are seeing, why your hair is combed differently, and whether your tunic is cleaner than usual. No answer satisfies them. A denial is treated as proof. Silence is taken as shyness. Protest is considered passion. You cannot win. They pat your arm knowingly, exchange glances, and announce to the air that the young never understand their own hearts. Then, they proceed to explain your heart to you with alarming detail, complete with plans for your wedding feast. The feasts, of course, are their favorite invention. They speak as if they already see the tables laid out, the stew steaming, the ale flowing. They describe who will bring what dish, how many geese will be roasted, which musicians will play. They argue over details, sometimes loudly, as though the wedding were real and imminent. You listen in horrified fascination, as your supposed marriage is planned down to the last turnip pie, wondering when you lost control of your own life. When you attempt to interrupt, they wave you off, assuring you that young people never know what's best for themselves anyway. Their certainty is ironclad. To argue with them is to argue with the weather, yet for all their meddling, there is a strange comfort in their chaos. Beneath the exaggerations and the relentless matchmaking lies a kind of care. They want every young person paired, settled, secure before winter sets in. Their methods may be ruthless, their gossip merciless, but in their own way, they believe they are ensuring survival. Love, to them, is not fragile poetry but practical necessity, and if that means inventing a romance out of thin air to nudge two people together, so be it. They have lived long enough to see famine and war, and they know that sometimes happiness must be manufactured, pushed into existence by sheer insistence. Still, you wish they would not invent quite so much about you. The latest story claims you were seen walking hand in hand by moonlight, though in reality, you were chasing a runaway goat while your supposed partner shouted encouragement from a distance. The goat was caught, the story was not. Now the village whispers about your romantic midnight stroll, and no amount of protest will erase it. You have resigned yourself to the fact that in the eyes of the women at the well, you will always be in love, engaged, or heartbroken, depending on what story they prefer that day. And so you carry your bucket, nod politely, endure their knowing smiles, and move through a world where your private feelings are never truly yours. You wonder if you will one day join them, shawl wrapped tight, eyes sharp, inventing futures for others with the same conviction. For now, though, you remain their subject, your life a story spun daily from water, whispers, and the cackling laughter that echoes over the village square. Festivals arrive whether you want them to or not, marked by the sudden sound of drums in the distance, and the equally sudden smell of roasting meat that may or may not have been fresh that morning. The whole village pours into the square as though fun is a requirement, and perhaps it is, because nothing draws people together like the promise of ale and the illusion of cheer. You are pushed along in the crowd, stumbling over discarded cabbage leaves, while children run in circles with painted faces, already sticky with honey cakes. It is here, in this chaos of mud, music, and overcooked pies, that courtship is expected to thrive, though more often it collapses spectacularly. You spot your beloved near the stall where meat pies steam ominously, the crusts flaking in a way that suggests both delight and danger. You want to look mysterious as you approach, but your boot sinks ankle-deep into mud, and you lurch forward, arms flailing, until you right yourself by grabbing the nearest thing, which happens to be a goat tethered too loosely. The goat bleats in protest. Your beloved laughs, and already you feel both mortified and strangely alive. Perhaps this is the essence of festival romance. Humiliation, performed in public, with just enough charm to be forgiven. Around you, games unfold with noisy enthusiasm. Men wrestle in the mud, while women shout wagers, their voices louder than the musicians. Cabbages are rolled down makeshift tracks, some veering wildly into the legs of spectators, others splattering apart in wet explosions. Children scream with joy, adults pretend to be impressed, and you stand there pretending that your heart isn't thudding because your beloved has just joined the cabbage rolling line. They bend to set their cabbage, the crowd cheers, and you realize with horror that if they win, the victory will be remembered as a feat of skill. But if they lose, you will laugh too hard, and your affection will be revealed to everyone. You clap politely, your smile forced, while silently praying to every saint you can name that the cabbage rolls straight. It doesn't. It careers sideways into a dog, which takes off running with the vegetable in its jaws, chased by children and cheered by half the village. Your beloved shrugs and grins, and somehow you love them more for the loss. Food is everywhere, and none of it feels safe. Sausages glisten suspiciously, pies ooze fillings of uncertain origin, and cups of ale slosh in hands already unsteady from too much merriment. Someone presses a cup into your palm and insists you drink, though the taste suggests it was brewed last year in a bucket forgotten behind the tavern. Your beloved accepts a pie, steam curling from its cracked crust, and you try to look brave while biting into your own. The filling burns your tongue, sticks to your teeth, and tastes vaguely of onions and regret. Yet you smile, because they are smiling too. And that is how festival romance works. Shared suffering disguised as pleasure, endured because everyone is watching. Music blares from lutes and drums, not quite in harmony, but loud enough to disguise the flaws. Dancing begins, a wild circle of stamping feet and clapping hands. You are shoved into it before you can protest, whirling clumsily, arms linked with strangers, until suddenly you find yourself face to face with your beloved. The circle demands you spin together, and you do, stumbling, colliding, breathless, with laughter. Your cloak tangles with theirs, someone steps on your foot, and you nearly topple. But for a brief, shining moment, it feels as though the entire festival has conspired to bring you close. Then the circle shifts, pulling you apart again, and you are left spinning with a sweaty farmer who smells strongly of cabbage. The spell shatters, but the memory lingers, tucked into your chest like a hidden gem. The elders, of course, treat festivals as matchmaking arenas. They hover near the games, near the dancing, near the food stalls, watching with hawk-like eyes for any sign of affection. When you laugh too loudly at your beloved's joke, 3 different women nudge each other knowingly. When you both reach for the same jug of ale, the priest mutters about propriety. You try to act casual, but your every movement is documented, exaggerated, retold before nightfall. By the time torches are lit and the bonfire blazes high, the story of your festival romance has already grown into a legend of shared cabbages, dancing flames, and vows exchanged over pies. You sigh, but secretly you are glad the tale at least includes them. Night deepens, and the air fills with smoke from the bonfire, sparks leaping into the sky as though stars are being born above your heads. Couples slip into shadows, hands brushing, whispers weaving through the crackle of flames. You are tempted, but you know the eyes of the village never truly rest, even in darkness. Somewhere an elder is watching, somewhere a child is listening, somewhere a goat is waiting to bleat at the perfect moment. Still, you linger near the fire's edge, feeling its heat and theirs, shoulders close enough that the world feels narrowed to just this small glow of possibility. Festivals end as they always do, with spilled ale, scattered cabbage leaves, songs sung too loudly, and hearts left wondering what was real and what was performance. You walk home muddy, your stomach unsettled from questionable pies, your ears ringing with half-tuned music. And yet, You carry with you the memory of laughter shared, of cloaks brushing in the dance, of eyes meeting across smoke and firelight. It is not subtle, it is not private, but it is yours. In a world where every glance is judged and every whisper repeated, the clumsy magic of festivals may be the closest thing to romance you will ever claim. You do not dress for romance in your world, you dress for survival, and hope that somewhere in the layers of wool, dirt, and goat hair, attraction can still be coaxed into existence. Your tunic itches against your skin, no matter how many times it is washed, which is not often, and your hose sag around the knees like deflated wineskins. The shoes you wear are mismatched, one handed down from an older cousin, the other acquired through a trade for onions, and they squeak in the mud like small dying animals. And yet you stand before your beloved in the village square, shoulders back, chin high, pretending that you are radiant, heroic, and not currently giving off the faint but undeniable scent of turnips. The elders insist that clothing is a reflection of one's soul, which is unfortunate, because your cloak is patched so many times it resembles a quilt assembled by a drunk. The thread that binds it is mismatched in color, bright red stitching running through brown cloth. So every repair screams for attention. You tell yourself it adds character, that it proves you have survived hardship, but in truth, it makes you look like you were attacked by an impatient tailor. Your belt is a piece of rope, fraying at the ends, tied in a knot you can never quite undo. Still, you tug it tight, and hope your beloved interprets the look as rugged, rather than ragged. Everyone is equally unfortunate in their attire, which is the only mercy. Your beloved wears a tunic that might once have been green, though it has now faded into a color best described as swamp with aspirations. Their shoes are caked with mud, and one is patched with a scrap of fur that looks suspiciously like it was stolen from a dog. Their cloak is stiff with last winter's smoke, and when they move too quickly, it releases the faint aroma of burnt cabbage. And yet you find them breathtaking, proof that love is not about appearance, but about the way someone smiles when they catch you staring. Seduction here requires imagination. A mud stain on your sleeve? That is not filth, you explain with pride, but a battle scar earned in heroic toil against the elements. The tear at your knee? Evidence of bravery in the cabbage fields. The goat hair clinging to your cloak? A token of your noble work tending livestock, not, as it truly was, the result of being shoved into a fence by an angry buck. You deliver these explanations with straight-faced dignity, hoping your beloved hears gallantry instead of excuses. They nod, amused, perhaps even charmed, because they too are inventing stories about their stains. Hair is another battlefield. You wash it only when the river is warm enough, which is seldom, and in between it gathers grease and hay until it looks less like hair and more like a nest. Combs are rare, so tangles are handled with fingers, producing results that could only be described as sculptural. To tame the mess, some smear goose fat into their locks, claiming it adds shine, though in practice it mostly adds smell. You try it once, sitting proudly in the sun, but within moments flies buzz around your head like you are a feast. Your beloved, passing by, swats them away gently, and you decide never to repeat the experiment. Still, you notice later that they braided a ribbon into their own hair, a scrap of faded cloth that brightens their face, and your heart lurches. It proves that even amid dirt and grease, small acts of beauty still matter. Jewelry, when it appears, is always strange. A necklace of teeth from rabbits caught last winter, a brooch hammered from a bent spoon, a bracelet strung with dried beans, rattling faintly with each step. You once carved a heart into a piece of wood and tied it to a cord, presenting it with the solemnity of a knight offering treasure. Your beloved laughed, but they tied it around their wrist anyway, and you felt taller than any nobleman in silk. True love, it seems, is not measured by gold, but by the willingness to wear beans proudly, because they were given by someone who stumbled through the effort. Festivals magnify the absurdity. Everyone arrives dressed in what they believe to be their finest, which usually means slightly less mud and slightly fresher goat hair. Tunics are scrubbed in cold water until the colors fade entirely. Cloaks are brushed with twigs to remove stubborn clumps of straw, and shoes are polished with whatever grease can be found. The result is a parade of villagers looking almost identical to how they appear every other day, except with slightly redder hands from scrubbing. Yet the air is thick with pride, with the belief that they have transformed into figures worthy of admiration. You too feel it, striding with as much grace as your rope belt will allow, convinced for a moment that your patched cloak is regal, and when your beloved looks at you, their eyes crinkling with something warmer than mockery, you almost believe it. In the end, fashion in your world is not about finery, but about endurance. It is about whether you can keep your feet dry enough to dance in the square, whether your cloak can keep out enough wind to let you walk home together after dusk, whether your mismatched shoes can still carry you to the well, where glances are stolen and gossip is born. Love thrives not because of beauty, but because it survives beneath the grime. You are not silk and gold. You are wool and mud, goat hair and rope, patched cloth and stubborn pride. And somehow, against all odds, you make it work. So you stand in the square, tunic itching, shoes squeaking, hair a chaos of knots, and still you smile when your beloved approaches. They are just as ragged, just as patched, just as perfumed by turnips and smoke. Yet in your eyes, they shine brighter than any noble dressed in velvet. And as the geese honk disapproval, as elders mutter about propriety, as mud splashes both your legs, you realize that true love here is not about looking flawless. It is about looking equally ridiculous and finding one another beautiful anyway. You never ask for the minstrel, but he comes anyway, swaggering into the square with his lute slung over his back like a weapon, grinning as though he alone has been chosen to reveal the innermost details of your pathetic little heart. He has the air of someone who knows far too much, though in truth he knows almost nothing. That doesn't stop him. Within moments he is tuning his strings, strumming loudly enough to drown out the blacksmith's hammer, and gathering a crowd with promises of a ballad about forbidden love. The words "forbidden love" are enough to make every gossip within 10 miles appear instantly, breathless, clutching their shawls like relics. You try to melt into the background, but it is no use. You are doomed. The song begins innocently enough, a tale of a poor soul pining for someone far above their station. But then the details slip in, too familiar, too precise. A stolen glance by the well, a tunic the color of swamp water, a shoe patched with fur. Your stomach drops. He is singing about you. Worse, he is singing badly, his voice wobbling like a goat attempting opera. Every rhyme is strained, every metaphor absurd, and yet the audience leans forward, enchanted, because nothing delights them more than hearing love reduced to poorly structured couplets. Love, dove, above, glove. The words tumble out again and again until you want to scream. There is no glove in this story, nor any dove, yet he insists, forcing them into every verse, like a farmer cramming turnips into a sack too small. Your beloved shifts uncomfortably, eyes darting between you and the minstrel, as though deciding whether to laugh or hide. You attempt to look stoic, but your ears burn, and each time the word dove echoes across the square, you feel as though another piece of your dignity flutters away. Children dance around the minstrel, clapping, chanting along to the rhymes. Elders nod sagely, whispering about destiny, though their whispers are louder than the song. A dog howls in painful harmony, which only adds to the performance. You stand frozen, hands clenched, wondering if love itself can die from sheer embarrassment. Perhaps this is how romance ends. Not with betrayal or tragedy, but with a poorly rhymed ballad shouted at full volume. When the song finally ends, the crowd erupts into applause. Coins clink into the minstrel's hat, and you are left standing like a statue carved from shame. The minstrel bows deeply, winking at you, as though he has done you the greatest favor. Your beloved bites their lip, clearly fighting laughter, and for a moment you hate everyone equally. You vow never to speak to a minstrel again, never to breathe near one, never to even think about one lest another ballad emerge. But the vow is useless, because they are everywhere, multiplying like weeds, eager for stories to twist into rhyme. The trouble is that songs stick. Long after the performance, villagers hum the tune while fetching water or stirring stew. Children sing it as a game, chasing each other through the mud, repeating the words until they lose all meaning. The baker whistles it while kneading bread. The shepherd mutters it under his breath while herding sheep. Soon your entire romance, real or imagined, exists only in the form of a ridiculous melody. You find yourself humming it too, against your will, cursing as the words love, dove, glove slip from your lips while you try to sleep. The minstrel has not only mocked you, he has colonized your brain. You consider revenge. Perhaps you could compose your own ballad, expose his flaws, sing of his poor rhyming, and his tunic that smells faintly of mildew. But your attempts at poetry have never ended well. After all, you once compared your beloved to damp bread, and you cannot risk another humiliation. You resign yourself to enduring the torment, praying that another scandal arises soon, one juicy enough to replace your song in the village memory. And yet, despite the suffering, part of you thrills at the attention. To have your love sung aloud, however clumsily, is to have it made real. It is no longer a secret flicker hidden in stolen glances. It is a flame blazing in the open, undeniable. Your beloved cannot pretend not to know, not after hearing verse after verse about the way you tripped near the well just to catch their eye. They cannot claim ignorance when the entire village now sings about your longing. The minstrel, in his infuriating way, has given you a kind of certainty. Love has been declared, even if not by your choice. Later, when the square is empty and the torches burn low, you find yourself walking beside your beloved. The silence is heavy, broken only by the creak of wagon wheels in the distance. At last they laugh softly, shaking their head, and say, "I've never been compared to a glove before." You groan, but their laughter is not cruel. It is warm, almost fond. For a moment, you see the humor too. Perhaps, you think, if love can survive being rhymed with dove 27 times, it can survive anything. Still, you pray that next time the minstrel chooses another victim, and if he dares approach you again, lute in hand, you swear you will shove that instrument into the nearest barrel of fish. Because no matter what anyone says, nothing kills romance faster than a rhyme scheme that refuses to die. You convince yourself the meeting is secret, but the truth is, nothing in the village ever stays hidden for longer than it takes a goose to waddle across the square. Still, the thrill of planning gives you hope. You whisper hurried words at the market, arrange to meet at dusk in the barn, and walk home with your heart hammering as though you've just plotted a grand escape rather than a stolen conversation. The air hums with anticipation. By the time the sky deepens into twilight, you are already rehearsing clever things to say, though you know full well that the moment will reduce you to awkward mumbling. The barn creaks with age, straw rustling underfoot, shafts of fading light cutting through cracks in the boards. You arrive early, trying to look casual while brushing mud from your tunic and hoping the smell of turnips doesn't cling as strongly as you fear. When they appear, hair tousled from the evening wind, you nearly forget how to breathe. The world narrows to this one place, this one moment, and you allow yourself to believe that no one knows, that you and your beloved are cloaked in invisibility. Then a cow shifts in the shadows, snorts loudly, and you realize you are not alone at all. The animals watch with unnerving intensity. Goats stare as though judging your every word. Chickens shuffle closer to peck at your shoes, and the barn cat slinks along a beam overhead, eyes gleaming like twin lanterns. They are silent witnesses, but you know better than to trust them. By morning, their behavior will give you away. A goat that bleats unusually long at dawn, a cow that nudges the wrong person with too much familiarity. Such signs will be noted, discussed, and interpreted as evidence. You can already hear the elders muttering, "Why else would the goat look so pleased?" If the barn is too obvious, you try the fields. Tall grass sways around you, and for a few blissful moments, it feels like hiding. The sky stretches wide, painted in dusky blues and purples, and the air smells faintly of earth and smoke. You walk side by side, brushing shoulders, speaking in whispers though no one is near enough to hear. But soon enough, someone always passes by. A shepherd returning late, a child chasing a runaway chicken, a cart creaking along the path. They all glance at you with raised brows, and by morning, the story will spread. Not about the grass, not about the sky, but about how you lingered too long, too close, as though the whole field had been planted just to host your scandal. Bridges are no safer. You think perhaps the river, with its soft gurgle and cool night air, will shield you. You arrange to meet beneath the wooden planks, hearts racing at the thought of secrecy. But rivers are popular at dusk, and it seems every soul in the village decides they too must fetch water at the exact moment you arrive. Buckets thud, voices echo, and before long someone peers over the edge of the bridge and spots you both standing below. The whispers start before you even leave, traveling faster than the river's current, until by dawn the tale has grown into a full saga involving vows, kisses, and possibly a wedding planned by moonlight. You sigh, because the truth, that you merely exchanged awkward compliments and shivered in the cold, is never as exciting as the story others will tell. Even when you try the woods, slipping past the last cottages into the shadows of trees, secrecy proves impossible. Every snapping twig feels like a trumpet announcing your whereabouts. The owl hoots as if calling witnesses, and inevitably, you stumble upon someone gathering firewood or searching for mushrooms who stares at you knowingly before hurrying home to spread the tale. You might as well carry a banner reading "Romantic Rendezvous Happening Here." Privacy is a concept the village refuses to acknowledge, preferring to weave itself into every corner of your life until even your quietest moments are communal property. The gossip grows larger with each retelling. A brief meeting by the barn becomes a passionate embrace. A shared walk in the fields becomes a moonlit declaration. By the time the tale reaches the ears of the women at the well, you are apparently already betrothed, your dowry negotiated, your future children named. The accuracy of these accounts matters little. What matters is that the entire village now carries your secret, which is no longer a secret at all, but a communal project of speculation and embellishment. And yet, despite the exposure, despite the laughter and knowing looks, you continue to seek these meetings. There is something irresistible about the risk, about carving out a moment that belongs only to the two of you, even if cows and goats insist on sharing it. The knowledge that others will find out does not diminish the thrill of the hush, the closeness, the brush of fingers beneath the hay. You begin to understand that secrecy is not about hiding from the village. It is about pretending, for just a little while, that you can. One night, as you part beneath the bridge, footsteps crunch above, and you freeze. But instead of hurrying away, you linger, smiling at each other in the shadows, daring the world to see. Because by now you know they will see anyway. They will twist it, retell it, laugh about it. But here, in this stolen fragment of time, their stories cannot touch you. The river murmurs, the night closes in, and for a heartbeat, the secret is yours, no matter how loudly the cows will gossip come morning. The village is small, the winters are long, and the number of eligible singles can be counted on one hand, even if two of the fingers are missing from an unfortunate scythe accident. Love here does not bloom like a meadow of endless choices. It squats stubbornly like a cabbage patch, offering only what it can. Inevitably, crushes overlap. You glance shyly at someone across the well, only to discover that your neighbor has already carved their initials into a tree alongside theirs. You share a smile over a shared turnip pie, but by evening you hear that two others have also claimed the same smile, staking their hopes on it as though it were land in a border dispute. there is no avoiding it. Courtship is less about sweet romance and more about navigating the ever-expanding geometry of rivalry. At first, it is a triangle. You, your beloved, and the butcher's son, who is smug only because his family owns a mule that bites slightly less frequently than yours. He struts around the market, announcing loudly that his mule can pull twice as many sacks of grain without collapsing, and the elders nod approvingly, as though such matters decide the fate of hearts. You try to ignore him, but every time you offer a compliment, he appears to offer one louder, grander, and more ridiculous. You murmur, "Your hair shines in the sun," only for him to shout, "Your hair blinds me with its holy light." You whisper, "I saved you the best apple," and he bellows, "I would fell an entire orchard for you." The crowd applauds his declarations, while you stand silently fuming, clutching your single apple and praying for lightning to strike. But triangles never stay neat. Soon another enters the fray, a shepherd with a fine cloak woven by their grandmother, which they wear constantly as though daring others to compete. They claim their flock produces the softest wool in the shire, and suddenly your beloved is gifted with mittens, while you have nothing but splinters from carving wooden hearts. The geometry expands, the lines blur, and what was once a triangle becomes a quadrangle, each corner glaring suspiciously at the others. You try to smile politely when paths cross, but your rivalries seethe beneath every greeting, every forced laugh, every too long look at the same person. By midsummer, it has become a hexagon. The baker's daughter joins in, citing her endless supply of pies as the ultimate proof of devotion. She presses steaming loaves into your beloved's hands while you watch, hungry, clutching your stomach. Then comes the miller's apprentice, who claims to have the strongest arms in the village, flexing unnecessarily whenever anyone is near. He lifts sacks of flour with dramatic grunts, glancing sideways to see who is impressed. The rivalry has grown so tangled that even the elders struggle to keep track of who is meant to be courting whom. They wag their fingers and mutter about propriety, but secretly they are delighted, for gossip thrives best when the shapes of love grow complicated. The contests of affection become absurd. Who can haul the most buckets of water from the well without spilling? Who can recite the longest prayer without gasping for air? Who can wrestle a goose into submission and emerge with both dignity and feathers intact? You participate reluctantly, determined not to be shown up, though the results are never in your favor. Your bucket sloshes water all over your tunic, your prayer ends with a choking cough, and the goose chases you halfway across the square while your rivals laugh. Your beloved watches it all with a bemused smile, neither discouraging nor encouraging, leaving you to wonder whether the entire ordeal is worth it. And yet, you cannot stop. No one can. Pride is at stake, and pride matters even more than affection. You begin to notice that your beloved is less flattered than exhausted. Their hands are full of gifts they never asked for: herbs, pies, wool mittens, even a dented cauldron that someone insisted symbolized eternal devotion. They nod politely, smile faintly, and slip away whenever possible, as though hoping to escape the geometry entirely. But escape is impossible, because every rival insists their gesture is the grandest, their mule the sturdiest, their goose wrestling prowess unmatched. The battle rages on, fueled by desperation and boredom, until the entire village is dragged into choosing sides. Children chant songs about the rivals, merchants whisper wagers, and the women at the well declare daily updates on who is currently winning. In the end, victories are determined less by beauty or skill, and more by circumstance. The butcher's son is eliminated after his mule finally bites a visiting priest, earning divine disapproval. The shepherd withdraws after their prized cloak is stolen by a crow and shredded into a nest. The baker's daughter loses ground when her oven collapses, depriving her of her pie advantage. One by one, rivals fade, not defeated by your charm, but undone by bad luck and troublesome animals. The hexagon shrinks to a triangle again, though you know it will not last. Another will appear soon, waving a jug of mead or boasting about their new cartwheel, and the shape will shift once more. For now, you cling to the small victories. Your beloved still accepts your awkward gifts, still laughs at your jokes, even when the minstrel ruins them with rhyme, still stands beside you at festivals when the music begins. You cannot outshine the pies or the mittens or the mules, but perhaps you can outlast them. Love in your world is not about triumph in grand contests, but about stubbornness, about remaining after everyone else has collapsed from exhaustion. And so you endure the triangles, the quadrangles, the hexagons, and whatever comes next. Because in the geometry of village romance, the only real secret is this: the shape does not matter, so long as you are still one of the lines that leads to them. The tavern is where romance goes not to flourish but to be torn apart, twisted, and shouted about until it collapses under the weight of too many tankards. You walk in for a quiet drink, hoping only to warm your bones by the fire, and before you have even sat down, the air is already thick with rumor. Someone laughs too loudly near the hearth, and half the room leans in to decide what the laughter means. Was it innocent? Was it flirtation? Was it proof of an affair so scandalous it will need to be retold at least 12 times before morning? The answer hardly matters. By the time you raise your mug, the story has taken root, and by dawn, it will have grown wild as ivy. The tavern thrives on this. Every glance is a performance, every whispered word a proclamation. If you so much as nod at someone across the table, 3 old men will mutter that wedding bells are imminent. If you smile politely, 2 women will swear they saw longing in your eyes. Once you sneezed while passing a pitcher of ale, and somehow that was twisted into a confession of passion for the barmaid, who spent the next month glaring at you as though you had ruined her reputation. The truth, that you simply inhaled too much smoke from the fire, was never believed. The tavern does not care for truth. It prefers stories soaked in ale and served with a side of exaggeration. Jealousy blooms here like mold on bread. A single toast can ignite chaos. Someone raises a mug to celebrate another's fine harvest, and suddenly 3 rivals feel slighted because their cabbages weren't praised. You see it unfold one evening. A drunken man stumbles to his feet, sloshing ale down his tunic, and declares his admiration for your beloved singing voice. The words are clumsy, harmless, yet by the time he sits down, 2 others have challenged him to duels at dawn. The tavern roars with delight, wagers are made, and you are left staring into your cup, wondering how you became part of a story you never agreed to. The next day, no one remembers who fought whom, but everyone remembers that your beloved's voice was worth blood. Breakups are public, loud, and impossible to avoid. Couples argue across tables, hurling insults that double as entertainment for the entire room. Once you watched as 2 lovers fought over a borrowed cloak, their voices rising until the innkeeper banged a ladle against the counter to restore order. By morning, the tale had grown into a saga of betrayal involving goats, stolen honey, and a clandestine kiss behind the church. None of it was true, but no one cared. The tavern thrives on drama, not accuracy. If you wish to preserve your dignity, you must never raise your voice, never gesture too wildly, never allow your gaze to linger for more than a second. But of course you do. Everyone does. It is impossible not to. The tavern demands its spectacle, and you cannot help but provide it. And then there are the poems. Always the poems. A drunken man with ink-stained fingers will stagger to the center of the room, demand silence, and recite verses composed on the spot. The rhymes are uneven, the metaphors absurd, but the crowd cheers as though hearing the wisdom of saints. One such night, a poem begins innocently enough, describing love as sweet as onions in spring. But the poet, lost in his cups, cannot stop. He goes on and on, comparing eyelashes to onion stalks, kisses to onion broth, passion to the sting of onion tears. By the time he collapses, the room is laughing so hard the benches shake, and for weeks afterward, your beloved is greeted with sly nods and the nickname Sweet Onion. You would protest, but what good would it do? The tavern has spoken, and once spoken, a name sticks. You try to ignore the noise, to sip your ale quietly and slip away unnoticed, but jealousy seeps into you too. You catch a smile exchanged across the room and feel your chest tighten. You overhear laughter and imagine it is about you. Every gesture, every word, every glance becomes a weapon, sharpened by suspicion. Even when your beloved sits beside you, shoulder brushing yours, you cannot escape the fear that someone else will claim them with a louder laugh or a bolder toast. The tavern feeds on this fear, drinks it down as greedily as the ale, and belches it back out as gossip. And yet, for all its cruelty, you keep returning. Because sometimes, in the noise and smoke, there are moments of strange sweetness. A hand placed lightly on yours beneath the table, hidden from prying eyes. A whispered joke shared while the crowd roars at another duel. A song sung softly near the fire, so low only you can hear, drowned beneath the clamor. These are the moments you cling to, the ones that feel real beneath the performance. You know they will be twisted, reshaped, exaggerated by morning, but for now they are yours, and that is enough. Still, you cannot escape the knowledge that every step into the tavern is a step into danger. A smile might bind you, a laugh might betray you, a toast might spark chaos. And yet you go, again and again, because the tavern is not just a place to drink. It is the stage upon which your entire romance plays out, whether you wish it or not. You raise your cup, you whisper your words, you endure the poems about onions. And when the night ends, when the torches burn low and the benches are empty, you walk home through the mud, heart full of both dread and hope, knowing tomorrow's gossip is already taking shape in the dark. You learn quickly that gifts of love are not measured in gold or jewels, but in whatever can be scavenged, stolen, or hastily repurposed before someone notices. The idea of a grand token, something shining and eternal, is laughable when the nearest jeweler lives 3 days' journey away and only accepts payment in entire cows. Here, affection arrives in the form of wilted flowers plucked from a ditch, honeycomb still dripping and buzzing with the fury of bees, or rings suspiciously familiar, passed off with nervous laughter and the vague assurance that it's been in the family for generations. The accesspens, the flowers, are the most common. You pull them from hedgerows, from meadows, from the edges of ditches where pigs have wallowed, and present them with all the solemnity of a knight offering a crown. The stems are bent, the petals drooping, but you thrust them forward anyway, convinced that the gesture matters more than the condition. Your beloved accepts them politely, though you notice their fingers soon stained with pollen and mud, and later you find the bouquet wilting in the corner of their home, forgotten behind a jug of turnips. Still, the memory of handing them over keeps you warm, even if the flowers themselves have collapsed into compost. Honeycombs are riskier. To steal from bees is to gamble your dignity and your face, and yet the reward seems worth it. You stumble into the tavern one afternoon, cheeks swollen from stings, clutching a sticky lump wrapped in leaves. You present it proudly, your voice muffled by the swelling, and your beloved laughs so hard they nearly fall from their seat. They take the honey anyway, promising to use it in cakes, though you suspect they mostly admire the absurdity of your sacrifice. For weeks afterward, children buzz mockingly whenever you pass, flapping their arms like wings, but you endure it, because in the corner of your beloved's smile you see that the honey, despite everything, meant something. Rings are another matter entirely. A true ring, purchased or forged, is nearly impossible to obtain, which means most circulate through theft or dubious inheritance. One day you spot a ring gleaming on your beloved's finger, and you feel a surge of triumph, until you realize it once belonged to the miller's wife, who is now glaring daggers at you from across the market. You protest that you had nothing to do with its acquisition, but no one listens, and for weeks you are blamed for the theft, despite the fact that you still wear rope for a belt. Eventually, the matter is forgotten, replaced by new scandals, but the suspicion lingers. Rings in your village are never entirely safe. Each one carries a story of dubious ownership, whispered arguments, and the quiet shuffling of feet whenever someone asks, "Where did you get that?" Not all gifts are intentional. Once, in a fit of nerves, you handed your beloved a potato, blurting out that it reminded you of their steadfast nature. They stared at it, baffled, before bursting into laughter. And for days afterward, they teased you by carrying the potato around like a talisman. Another time, you carved a heart into a lump of wood, presenting it with trembling pride, only for them to point out that it looked more like a lopsided turnip. You blushed. But they tucked it into their pouch anyway, and the sight of it there made you feel as though you had succeeded. Love in your world is not about beauty, but about persistence, about carving turnips into hearts and pretending wilted flowers are rare treasures. The trouble is that every gift becomes public property. You may intend a token for your beloved alone, but within hours the entire village knows. The flowers are spotted in their window, and the women at the well declare them evidence of impending betrothal. The honey is shared at a feast, each sticky bite accompanied by exaggerated tales of your battle with the bees. The ring sparks gossip so loud it drowns out the blacksmith's hammer. Privacy is impossible. Your gestures are dissected, mocked, admired, and retold until they no longer belong to you. What was once a quiet offering becomes a village-wide performance. And yet, you keep trying. Because despite the mockery, despite the sideways glances and the buzzing imitations of children, your beloved accepts what you give. They smile, they laugh. They sometimes even keep the tokens longer than you expect. Once, you saw the wilted flowers pressed between the pages of a book, flattened but preserved. Another time, you found the wooden heart tied to their belt, worn smooth from handling. These small signs sustain you, proof that beneath the laughter lies something real. You are not giving jewels, but you are giving pieces of yourself, and somehow that is enough. So you continue to search for gifts, however questionable. You pluck flowers already drooping in the sun. You eye the bees with fresh determination. You polish stones until your fingers ache. You carve shapes from wood. You scavenge scraps of cloth. You gather what little you can. Each offering is imperfect, tinged with suspicion or ridicule, but each one is also yours. And in a world where goats witness your secrets and minstrels turn your stumbles into ballads, these gifts remain the only language you can truly claim. One day, perhaps, you will find a token that cannot be mocked. A gift so perfect it silences the tavern and leaves the women at the well blinking in stunned approval. But until then, you will keep presenting potatoes, wilted flowers, and sticky honey, because in the end, it is not the gift that matters. It is the look in your beloved's eyes when they accept it, amused but tender, as though they understand what you mean despite the mud, the bees, and the questionable ownership of rings. And that look, you realize, is the greatest gift of all. The village dance begins the same way every time, with a fiddle shrieking like a cat in distress and a drum thumping out a rhythm that feels less like music and more like an urgent reminder of mortality. The square fills with people, the torches flicker, and everyone is expected to join in, whether they can dance or not. You cannot, of course, but that has never stopped anyone. You shuffle into the circle with the rest, adjusting your rope belt, wiping your palms on your tunic, and telling yourself that this is not just a social obligation, but a chance to show your beloved that you are both graceful and desirable. It is a lie you believe for approximately 3 beats before disaster begins. The dance is less choreography and more chaos disguised as tradition. Couples spin wildly, clapping hands, stomping feet, and colliding with alarming regularity. Children dart through the crowd like mischievous spirits. Dogs bark along to the music, and someone inevitably trips over a chicken. You do your best to keep time, stamping when others stamp, clapping when others clap, but the rhythm seems to shift just as you find it, and soon you are 2 steps behind. Still, you smile bravely, convinced that effort counts more than elegance. Then your foot lands squarely on your partner's toes, and the illusion shatters. Your beloved winces, though they try to mask it with a laugh. You mumble apologies, flailing to regain your balance, only to stumble into a bench that collapses under your weight. The crowd roars with laughter. The fiddler never misses a beat, and you rise with straw in your hair, dignity trailing behind you like a forgotten cloak. You rejoin the dance anyway, because leaving now would be worse, and besides, everyone expects clumsiness. In fact, half the charm of the evening lies in the spectacle of it. Who danced gracefully? No one remembers. Who fell face first into a bucket of cider? That will be recounted for years. The rules of romance during the dance are unspoken but ironclad. A hand held for the length of 1 beat is polite. 2 beats suggest mild interest. 3 beats, and the entire village assumes a betrothal is imminent. You learn this the hard way when you cling too long, not out of passion but because you slipped on spilled ale and needed the support. By the time you steady yourself, the crowd has already erupted into knowing whistles, and the women at the well are nodding sagely. Your beloved's cheeks flush crimson. And though they laugh it off, you know the story will spread before the night ends. By dawn, it will be said you proposed marriage in front of the blacksmith, the priest, and 3 goats. Even when you succeed in moving with some semblance of rhythm, new hazards emerge. Your belt unravels mid-spin, leaving your tunic flapping scandalously as you scramble to retie it. A candle tips in the wind, setting a neighbor's cloak briefly aflame before being doused in ale, the smell of smoke mingling with sweat and cider. The fiddler grows ambitious, speeding up the tune until half the dancers collapse in a heap, gasping for air. You cling to your beloved's hand, stumbling, spinning, laughing despite yourself, because in the chaos, something strange and exhilarating happens. For a few fleeting moments, you are not a bumbling villager with mud on your boots. You are part of something wild and reckless, a whirl of firelight and movement where even mistakes feel like magic. The dance always draws spectators, those too old or too cynical to join but eager to watch. They sit on benches, mugs in hand, commenting loudly on every misstep. That one will never keep a wife if he treads so heavily, someone says as you nearly crush another set of toes. Look at the way she spins. Too fast, she'll spin her chances away, mutters another. Their judgments are sharp, but their smiles betray enjoyment. They are not here for romance but for comedy, and you provide it generously. And yet, amid the laughter and the blunders, something real flickers. Your beloved squeezes your hand when you falter, steadying you. They laugh, but not cruelly, their eyes shining with warmth. When you finally manage a spin without falling, they beam at you as though you have conquered the world. You realize that clumsy as you are, they are still here, still holding your hand, still moving with you through the madness. Perhaps the dance is not about skill at all, but about persistence, about stumbling together and laughing anyway. The night ends with the circle breaking apart, dancers collapsing onto benches, panting and flushed. The fiddler sets down his bow with a flourish. The drummer wipes sweat from his brow, and the square settles into the low hum of chatter and clinking mugs. You sit beside your beloved, feet aching, knees bruised, hair damp with sweat, and feel oddly triumphant. You may not have impressed the crowd, you may have nearly destroyed a bench, but you survived. More than that, you shared something, ridiculous and awkward, but undeniably yours. On the walk home, the moon bright above, you replay the evening in your mind. The laughter, the stumbles, the accidental proposal that will no doubt be gossiped about for weeks. You cringe, then smile, then cringe again. But when your beloved brushes your shoulder lightly with theirs, you decide it doesn't matter. Because in the end, the dance is not about grace or perfection. It is about clumsy courtship in motion, about daring to step into the chaos and finding, against all odds, that someone is still willing to stumble with you. You think romance is difficult enough with priests glaring, parents bargaining, and half the village whispering about every glance. But then you realize you've forgotten the most persistent chaperones of all, the animals. They are everywhere, forever watching, forever interfering, and they do not care for human notions of privacy or passion. Chickens scatter beneath foot just as you lean in for something tender. Cows stare with eyes that seem to judge your every choice. And goats, always goats, appear at the worst possible moment to chew away at your dignity. It starts small. You arrange to meet your beloved near the barn, timing it so the evening sun will cast everything in a flattering glow. You practice your words, steady your nerves, and just as you finally manage to close the distance between you, a chicken flaps madly between your legs, shrieking as though you had committed an unforgivable crime. The moment dissolves in feathers and panic. You chase the bird away, hair disheveled, only to look up and see your beloved doubled over with laughter. The tenderness is gone, replaced by clucking that echoes in your ears long after. Cows, meanwhile, are less dramatic but more unnerving. They watch, always. Their wide eyes follow you as you walk hand in hand through the meadow, their steady chewing a reminder that no secret is truly secret. You try to ignore them, but the longer they stare, the more you feel as though you're being judged. And perhaps you are. In a world where gossip spreads like fire, even cows seem complicit. Later, someone always knows exactly where you were and with whom, and you cannot shake the suspicion that the cows have reported back. When one bellows during a stolen kiss, you hear it less as a moo and more as an accusation. Then there are the dogs. Loyal to no one but themselves, they delight in ruining quiet moments. You kneel in the grass to whisper something sweet, only for a slobbering hound to shove its nose between you, panting happily as though demanding inclusion. You try to push it away, but it circles back, licking faces, wagging its tail, and barking until the moment is gone. The villagers laugh when they see it, muttering that perhaps the dog approves or perhaps it is jealous. Either way, your words are forgotten, drowned in slobber and noise. The goats, however, are the true enemies of love. Mischievous, relentless, and always hungry, they treat romance as their personal playground. You bring your beloved a carefully chosen cabbage, its leaves fresh and green, only to have a goat snatch it from your hands before you can speak. You shout, you chase, but the goat devours the cabbage with smug efficiency, leaving you empty-handed and humiliated. Your beloved tries to console you, but the sight of the goat's chewing face ruins any sense of dignity. Worse still, the story spreads, and soon the entire village refers to the incident as the proposal that fed the goat. Horses, too, find ways to intrude. You plan a romantic ride, imagining yourself as a knight, with your beloved clinging gracefully behind. Instead, the horse chooses that moment to roll in the dirt, nearly crushing you both, or to stop suddenly and relieve itself in full view of everyone. The dream of noble courtship dissolves into mud, stench, and awkward silence. You try again another day, only to be thrown when the horse decides it dislikes your tunic. The bruises you carry afterward are less a badge of honor and more a warning against ambition. Even smaller creatures seem determined to interfere. Cats leap onto laps mid-conversation, scratching at hands that reach for your beloveds. Ducks waddle through doorways at the worst times, quacking with alarming insistence until everyone notices. Once, while leaning in for what might have been your first true kiss, a goose hissed and chased you halfway across the square, wings flapping, while your beloved laughed until tears streamed down their cheeks. You did not return to that spot for weeks. It becomes clear that animals are not merely obstacles but active participants in the theater of your courtship. They sense moments of importance and rush in to disrupt, as though the natural world conspires to remind you that love is never private, never simple. You begin to plan accordingly. You meet behind hayricks, only to find mice scattering through your shoes. You sneak to the mill, only for the donkey to bray so loudly the sound carries for miles. No matter where you go, the animals find you, and they never let you forget your place in the order of things. And yet, for all their interference, sometimes they seem to help. A kitten curled in your beloved's arms gives you an excuse to sit closer, to brush a finger against soft fur, and, by accident, their hand. A cow's slow, steady breathing becomes a kind of rhythm as you talk quietly in the pasture, words flowing more easily with its presence. Even the goat, once full of your cabbage, later provides laughter when you retell the story. Your humiliation softened by the way your beloved remembers it fondly. Perhaps the animals are not enemies after all, but reluctant allies, guiding your courtship in ways you never intended. You begin to wonder if love here is meant to include them, if every romance must be witnessed not only by villagers but by creatures who cannot speak, yet somehow shape your fate. The cows will always chew and stare, the chickens will always flap, the goats will always chew more than food. You cannot control it, any more than you can control gossip or weather, so you accept it. You smile when the hound bounds between you. You laugh when the goose chases you again. You even save an extra cabbage in case the goat returns, because in the end, perhaps it is fitting. Your world is messy, muddy, full of noise and feathers and fur. Love here is not separate from that chaos, but tangled within it, stitched together by laughter, by interruptions, by the presence of beasts that never let you take yourself too seriously. And maybe that is the point, that romance, like life, is never neat or private or free from judgmental cows. It is clumsy, loud, chewed at the edges, and yet somehow still worth chasing, even if a goat gets the cabbage first. Romance in your village is less about hearts and more about eyebrows, nods, and shrugs, none of which ever mean what you think they mean. Words are rare, carefully rationed like salt, and when spoken, they come tangled in dialects so thick you could knit a blanket from them. So much depends on looks across markets, on gestures made in smoky taverns, on whispers half heard between the toll of bells. Inevitably, meaning goes astray, and love becomes less a clear song than a game of blindfolded children shouting over one another in a barn. You stand in the market, clutching a turnip you pretend to be interested in. When your beloved raises an eyebrow in your direction, your heart leaps. Is this the signal? The long-awaited sign that affection has blossomed at last? You smile, straighten your posture, ready to carve their initials into the nearest fence post. Only later do you learn that the eyebrow was not for you, but for the fishmonger behind you, whose eels were suspiciously limp. By then, however, the rumor has already spread. You and your beloved are practically Wednesday. The eyebrow has spoken, and the village will not hear otherwise. Sometimes it is a nod. You nod once across the well, meaning to say, hello. Your beloved nods back, intending nothing more than, yes, I see you. But by evening, the women at the well declare it was the solemn nod of a betrothal pact, witnessed by the entire village and perhaps a goat. Soon, people congratulate you on your engagement, and when you protest, they laugh knowingly, certain you are being coy. You try to explain, but every word only deepens their conviction. You are trapped by a nod, doomed by its simplicity. Shrugs are worse. You shrug after dropping a basket of apples, embarrassed but calm. Your beloved, watching from the other side of the market, shrugs back in solidarity. But what does it mean? Is it resignation? Affection? A secret code? The entire day you fret, convinced you have missed something crucial. That night, the tavern hums with speculation, and by morning, you hear that your shrugs signaled a quarrel, or worse, that you agreed to part ways forever. The apples roll down the lane forgotten, while your reputation as a spurned lover grows. Even spoken words betray you. You recite carefully rehearsed compliments, only for the wind to carry them wrong. Your eyes are like stars, you declare, but a cough turns it into, your eyes are like scars. You mean to compare their hair to silk, but in your nervousness you say, silt, leaving them wondering if you see them as river muck. Every attempt becomes a small disaster, and by the time you retreat, you are no longer sure if you praised or insulted them. The priest later mutters about your blasphemous metaphors, and you vow never to speak again. The absence of writing makes things worse. Love letters exist, but parchment is scarce, ink rarer still, and your Latin makes even goats look scholarly. You scrawl a note declaring eternal devotion, but your beloved interprets it as a request for cheese. They reply with a drawing of a heart, which you assume is consent to marriage, only to learn later it was simply their attempt at doodling a potato. The misunderstanding becomes so tangled that by the time you sort it out, 3 duels have been fought in your honor, and one minstrel has composed a ballad that gets every detail wrong. You try other methods, leaving tokens, sending gifts, enlisting friends to speak on your behalf. But each one breeds confusion. A flower placed on their doorstep is eaten by a cow before they see it, and they hear instead that you left dung as a message of disdain. A pie you baked is intercepted by children, who deliver crumbs and say you cursed them with eternal hunger. You ask a friend to whisper your feelings, but by the time he finishes embellishing, you are accused of promising half your family's land and your best mule. You do not even own a mule. The worst moments are when silence itself is misread. You stand quietly at your beloved's side, content just to be near, only for others to assume your solemnity is a sign of mourning. Soon rumors swirl that you are heartbroken, or ill, or sworn to celibacy. By the time you protest, the tale has hardened into fact, and you are treated with pitying glances. Your beloved, meanwhile, wonders why you look so grim, and whether they have offended you. The silence grows until it weighs more than words ever could. And yet, for all the disasters, somehow love persists. You trip, you misspeak, you shrug when you should nod, you nod when you should say nothing, and still your beloved meets you in the fields. Still they laugh at your stumbles, still they forgive your tangled words. Perhaps this is the secret, that misunderstanding is not an obstacle, but the very fabric of romance. It forces patience, endurance, and a willingness to see beyond the blunders. One evening, after a day full of botched gestures, you sit together beneath the fading sky. You do not speak, afraid of what might come out wrong. Instead, you let the silence stretch, waiting for it to be misinterpreted. But when your beloved leans gently against your shoulder, no one is there to twist it, no cow to moo judgment, no neighbor to carry tales. For once, the meaning is clear. You breathe, you smile, you allow yourself to believe that despite everything, eyebrows, shrugs, rumors, the message has been received. Elopement sounds daring in theory. You imagine yourself and your beloved slipping away under cover of night, cloaked in shadows, hand in hand, hearts pounding as you outrun parental wrath and village gossip. The stories make it sound romantic, 2 souls defying the world, riding into freedom on the back of a noble steed. But your reality is less poetry and more mud. The horse refuses to move, the dog won't stop barking, and your beloved has packed 3 cabbages, a frying pan, and 1 left shoe, just in case. Body n'others self-fard. Parents forbid the match not because of grand feuds or ancient curses, but for reasons spectacularly petty. One insists your dowry is too small. Another says your family's field floods too easily. And both agree that your mule is entirely too unpredictable to tie their legacy to. You protest, you argue, you plead, but the decision stands. Love is dismissed as nonsense, unfit to compete with acres and goats. So you whisper with your beloved by the well, plotting escape, swearing solemn oaths beneath the judgmental gaze of cows. You will leave, you decide, and no one will stop you, except, of course, everyone will. The first attempt ends quickly. You creep through the village with bundles of bread and cheese, only to realize that your beloved's little brother has followed, loudly asking if he can come too. His shouts rouse the dog rouses the chickens, and within moments the entire village is awake, watching you, with expressions ranging from amusement to mild annoyance. By dawn, your parents are scolding you while neighbors shake their heads knowingly. The tale spreads, and by evening you are mocked for attempting an elopement that didn't even reach the next hedge. The second attempt is better planned. You wait until a feast, when the villagers are full of ale and song, and slip away while the fiddler plays. You make it as far as the mill before disaster strikes. Your beloved, determined to leave a sign of affection, drops a trail of breadcrumbs behind you, romantic in thought, but disastrous in practice. By morning, not only have the crumbs been followed, but half the geese in the shire are waddling behind you, honking loudly enough to wake the dead. The villagers find you easily, sitting beside the geese, swatting at feathers, while your beloved insists it was symbolic. You return home in disgrace, trailing feathers like a defeated knight. By the third attempt, you are desperate. You decide to leave no trail, to slip silently away beneath the stars. But goats have other plans. One follows you, chewing through the strap of your bundle, scattering turnips across the path. By morning, the villagers have traced your progress by the half-eaten vegetables, and once again you are dragged back, this time by your own aunt, who claims she only came out to collect herbs and happened upon you. The goat returns smugly to the barn, victorious. Rumors grow wilder with each failure. Some say you were caught in the woods swearing eternal devotion to a tree. Others insist you tried to bribe the priest into marrying you with stale pies. One minstrel sings a ballad about your cowardice, rhyming love with dove so insistently that you consider hurling his lute into the river. Every whispered conversation now carries your name, every raised eyebrow a reminder of your failed rebellions. The idea of escape begins to feel impossible, yet the longing only grows stronger. At last, you try once more. You pack nothing, take no food, and tell no one. You meet your beloved by the river, where the moonlight turns everything silver. You cross hand in hand, silent, determined, the sound of rushing water covering your steps. For once, it seems you may succeed. No chickens, no goats, no geese, just the two of you and the night. You walk until dawn paints the sky, until your feet ache and your breath burns, until you are certain you are free. Then, in the next village, you hear it. Laughter. They know your names, your story, your every failed attempt. Your tale has traveled faster than you. A farmer claps you on the back, offering congratulations on your fourth elopement, while his wife insists you stay for breakfast. You realize with dawning horror that escape is impossible, not because of parents or geography, but because gossip outruns even the swiftest mule. No matter where you go, your village follows, tucked in the mouths of travelers, carried on the wind like smoke. And yet, sitting beside your beloved in a strange kitchen, sipping thin broth offered by strangers, you find yourself laughing. The failure is complete, the escape undone, but your beloved's hand is still warm in yours, and the absurdity of it all feels almost heroic. You are not free, not yet, but you are together, and perhaps that is enough. The stories will keep spreading, the villagers will keep judging, and the animals will keep sabotaging. But for one fragile moment, amid the laughter of strangers and the smell of borrowed bread, you feel triumphant. Love, you realize, was never about escaping the village. It was about daring to try, about running through mud and feathers and ridicule, about choosing each other even when the world, or at least a particularly greedy goat, stands in your way. And though you know you will be dragged back again, though you know another lecture awaits, you also know this. One day you may succeed, or you may fail forever. But either way, they will remember you, the two fools who chased love with breadcrumbs and turnip pies. And perhaps that is a kind of victory after all. The wedding begins not with romance, but with shouting. Someone has misplaced the priest's hat. Someone else has stolen the best jug of mead, and your uncle is already arguing with the blacksmith about who once borrowed whose hammer and never returned it. You stand nervously at the center of it all, sweating in wool that smells faintly of goats, trying to look like a person prepared for holy matrimony instead of a condemned criminal awaiting judgment. Your beloved is across the square, surrounded by relatives fussing with their tunic, pulling at their sleeves until they resemble a sack of barley trussed for market. The fiddler plays in the corner, horribly off-key, but no one notices because the chickens have escaped again and are flapping around the benches reserved for elders. The ceremony itself is supposed to be solemn, vows, prayers, blessings. Instead, it is a spectacle. Children dart between legs, shouting about turnips, while the village drunk insists on reciting poetry loudly from the sidelines. Your mother weeps loudly enough to drown out the priest, though whether from joy or despair no one can say. The priest coughs, raises his hands for silence, and begins with a warning about sin, temptation, and eternal damnation should you fail in your duties. The crowd nods seriously, then immediately begins whispering about whether the dowry was as large as rumored. You stand rigid, clutching your beloved's hand, wondering if this is truly the path to bliss or simply a rehearsal for lifelong humiliation. Midway through, the chaos deepens. A cousin faints dramatically after too much mead, though she revives quickly when someone mentions pie. A goat wanders into the circle, chewing lazily on the edge of the altar cloth. The priest pretends not to notice, though it is difficult when the goat's head is practically in his book of prayers. Someone sneezes so loudly that half the crowd takes it as an omen. The fiddler attempts to cover the sound with a flourish, but his string snaps, whiplashing into the jug of mead and spilling it onto the priest's shoes. You begin to laugh, nervously at first, then helplessly, until your beloved squeezes your hand and you both struggle to compose yourselves. It is a wedding, after all. You must try to look serious, even as the goat refuses to leave. When the vows finally come, they are drowned in noise. You say the words carefully, solemnly, though the priest mispronounces your name and the village drunk repeats every line in falsetto. Your beloved's vows are interrupted by a distant brawl between two uncles, fists flying over the proper recipe for cabbage stew. No one hears the promises clearly, but everyone cheers anyway, satisfied that enough syllables have been muttered to count. Rings, if there are any, are misplaced, and so you exchange twine hastily tied into loops. The priest blesses you, still glaring at his shoes, and declares the union holy. The crowd erupts with cheers, though half are already moving toward the tables laden with food. The feast is less celebration than endurance trial. You are seated at the center, expected to smile as endless plates are pressed into your hands. Bread, stews, pies, sausages of questionable origin. You eat until you can no longer feel your stomach, nodding gratefully though you long to lie down. The mead flows freely, and with it, the gossip. Already your marriage is dissected, its future predicted in hushed tones. They'll have 6 children, one aunt declares. No, 4, and one will become a priest, another insists. 2 at most, says a neighbor, and their mule will outlive them both. You smile tightly, sipping more mead, until the words blur into noise. Dancing follows, chaotic and inevitable. You are shoved into the circle, tripping over your own feet as relatives clap and shout encouragement. Your beloved spins gracefully, but you resemble a sack of grain hurled down a hill. Still, the crowd cheers, delighted less by grace and more by spectacle. Someone collapses onto a bench, someone else vomits near the fire, and through it all, the fiddler plays, determined to make his broken string work. The goat returns, somehow adorned with flowers, and is cheered as though it were an honored guest. You laugh until your sides ache, until you forget your nerves, until the chaos itself feels like a kind of joy. By night's end, the square is littered with overturned mugs, trampled bread, and sleeping villagers sprawled across benches. You and your beloved sit together, exhausted, your hands still clasped. Around you lies the ruin of celebration. Spilled mead, snores, the faint smell of smoke from someone's cloak. And yet, amid the wreckage, you feel something quiet and true. You endured it. The shouting, the gossip, the goat, the priest's soggy shoes. You survived the spectacle, and now you are bound not only by vows but by the absurdity of it all. Marriage, you realize, is less about the solemnity of words and more about surviving together when everything goes wrong, because it always will. And as your beloved leans against your shoulder, laughing softly at the sight of an uncle asleep in a cabbage cart, you know that you will face it all, the gossip, the chaos, the endless goats, together. The first night is meant to be sacred, mysterious, whispered about in hushed tones by giggling cousins and smug uncles. In reality, it is a crowded, overheated room, stuffed with too many relatives, a snoring dog, and a bed that creaks so loudly it might be announcing every movement to the entire parish. You sit at the edge of that bed, sweating through your woolen tunic, trying to look calm while your beloved fidgets beside you, both of you pretending not to notice the chorus of coughs, sighs, and shifting bodies from the pallets scattered around the floor. Privacy is a dream, and the dream has fled out the drafty window with the last of the summer air. The furniture does not help. The bed is old, donated by an aunt who swore it was sturdy as a saint's faith, though the groan it makes when you simply sit suggests otherwise. Every shift, every breath, every attempt to adjust sends up a complaint of wood so loud it could double as a war horn. Outside the door, your relatives hover, listening intently. You can feel their anticipation pressing against the walls, hear their muffled laughter as they wager on how quickly the deed will be done. The dog at the foot of the bed yawns, stretches, and stares at you with eyes that gleam with judgment. Your beloved clears their throat. You clear yours. Neither of you speaks, too aware that any words will carry through the paper-thin walls. Instead, you glance sideways, attempting to communicate through sheer force of will. The glance says, "Well, here we are." The answering glance says, "Yes," and half the village knows it. The silence grows unbearable, so you reach for their hand, only to knock over the jug of ale that someone thoughtfully left on the table. The crash wakes the cat, who leaps onto your chest, digging claws into your shoulder before darting into the shadows. From outside comes a roar of laughter, confirming that yes, everyone heard. You try again. This time, you lean in slowly, cautiously, but the bed creaks with such violence that you both freeze, certain it will collapse. A cousin groans from the corner, muttering about your lack of subtlety. Your beloved giggles, the sound muffled in their hand, and suddenly you are laughing too, quietly at first, then helplessly, until tears stream down your cheeks. The dog sighs deeply, unimpressed, and settles back into sleep. You are still laughing when someone outside the door calls out encouragement, followed by a bawdy song. You bury your face in the blanket, praying for divine intervention. When at last you manage to find some semblance of composure, the awkwardness lingers. You fumble with ties, with laces that knot stubbornly, with garments that cling like wet wool. Each tug makes more noise, each movement exaggerated by the creaks of the bed and the groans of the wood. You wonder if perhaps the saints themselves are watching, shaking their heads. Your beloved whispers something, but you only catch half of it over the din, and nod vigorously without knowing what you've agreed to. The night stretches, filled not with the soft sighs of romance, but with a cacophony of bedposts, pets, and the occasional fart from a relative too deep in sleep to care. By morning, the damage is done. The entire household greets you with knowing smiles, though none ask directly. They don't need to. The creaks, the laughter, the spilled ale, all told the story already. A neighbor congratulates you before you even leave the doorway. Children snicker behind their hands, running ahead to spread fresh gossip. The priest raises an eyebrow during morning prayers, though whether in blessing or warning, you cannot say. Your beloved squeezes your hand, their cheeks pink, and you both march through the stairs as though heading to battle. The days that follow are no easier. You are constantly reminded of that first night, whether by relatives who nudge you slyly, goats that bleat whenever you pass the barn, or friends who sing exaggerated ballads about beds collapsing in the dark. You protest, insisting the bed did not collapse, that nothing so dramatic happened. But the more you deny it, the more convinced they become. The truth no longer matters. The story has taken root. You are forever the couple whose wedding night was a symphony of creaks and chaos. And yet, despite the embarrassment, there is something strangely comforting in it. You and your beloved have shared humiliation, laughter, the absurdity of trying to find intimacy in a world where privacy is rarer than good bread. You have endured the bed, the pets, the chorus of relatives, and come out the other side still hand in hand. That bond, forged in noise and awkwardness, feels stronger than any whispered vow. So you accept it. You smile when the neighbors wink. You laugh when the minstrel sings. You shrug when the dog insists on sleeping at the foot of the bed every night thereafter. Romance, you realize, is not built on perfect silence or solemn moments. It is built on spilled ale, cats with sharp claws, and the laughter that follows when everything goes wrong. And though you may never have a night untouched by creaks or gossip, you know this much. When the morning comes and you face the world together, it feels less like humiliation and more like the start of something real. Marriage, you discover, is less about fiery passion and more about not throttling each other over bread. In the first weeks, love had felt grand, wrapped in vows and feasts, but now it is wrapped in laundry, smoke from the hearth, and arguments about who forgot to shut the pig pen. Romance becomes a quieter thing, buried beneath the daily grind, revealed in small gestures that keep you from collapsing under the weight of mud, chores, and never-ending relatives. You learn that to survive married life is to redefine love entirely. The bread is the first battleground. A fresh loaf appears, crust golden, steam rising, and instantly the question becomes, who gets the better half? At first, you attempt to share politely, slicing evenly, pretending not to notice when your beloved claims the larger piece. But after a while, you grow bolder, cutting with deliberate care to favor yourself. This, of course, is noticed. Soon, slicing bread is a ritual of diplomacy, each of you pretending not to care, while both eyes track every crumb. A true act of devotion, you realize, is handing over the crusty end without complaint. It is not poetry, but in this world, it is the purest form of romance. Pigs provide another constant test. They escape often, rooting through gardens and knocking over buckets of slop, and each time you argue over whose fault it was. Your beloved insists you left the gate open. You swear you fastened it. The argument grows until the pig itself wanders back, covered in turnip greens and looking smug, and you both fall silent, embarrassed at being outwitted by livestock. These quarrels never last, fading quickly into laughter, because there is no sense holding grudges when the pig will undoubtedly escape again tomorrow. Love becomes less about avoiding conflict and more about choosing not to let conflict linger. The gossip at the well, once a source of misery, becomes a kind of glue. You and your beloved stand together as women speculate about who is courting whom, who fainted in the tavern, who has debts hidden behind their sheep. The stories are wild, exaggerated, and often ridiculous, but you laugh at them together, trading looks that say, "Can you believe this nonsense?" It is in those shared smirks, those silent conversations amid the chaos, that you find something stronger than courtship. You are no longer two people hoping to be seen. You are a pair, bound by the absurdity of everyone else's lives. Even chores shift into a form of intimacy. You chop wood while your beloved carries kindling, sweat dripping down both your faces. You milk cows side by side, trading jokes about the priest's sermons while the animals flick their tails in irritation. You scrub laundry at the river until your hands sting, and your beloved sings nonsense songs to make you laugh. There is nothing glamorous in it, nothing fit for ballads, but in these rhythms you find comfort. The work is endless, the mud inevitable, yet it feels lighter because you are no longer doing it alone. Romance still exists, but it hides in unlikely places. It is in the way your beloved saves you the last spoonful of stew without comment. It is in the way you patch their cloak without being asked, fingers numb from the cold needle. It is in the moment you both collapse into laughter after tripping over the same chicken. Love, you discover, is not loud or dramatic. It is steady, persistent, stitched into the smallest moments until it becomes impossible to imagine life without it. Of course, there are still missteps. You forget anniversaries not because you do not care, but because time blurs into seasons of harvests and feasts. You quarrel over blankets, each tugging for warmth until both are tangled and freezing. You sulk when your beloved praises someone else's bread, even though you know they meant no harm. These small cracks appear often, but they mend quickly, filled with apologies muttered while stirring porridge or hugs given in passing. You learn that marriage is not the absence of trouble, but the willingness to repair it, again and again, no matter how many times it frays. Nights are quieter now, less filled with laughter from taverns, and more with the creak of your own hearth. You sit together in the dim glow, listening to the wind rattle shutters, speaking softly about the day. Sometimes you say nothing at all, letting the silence rest between you like a third presence, comfortable and kind. You fall asleep to the rhythm of your beloved's breathing, the dog curled at your feet, the sense that despite the chaos outside, here in this small space is something solid. The villagers still watch, still gossip, still intrude, but marriage dulls the sting. When someone comments on your mismatched shoes, you laugh together. When rumors swirl about who once kissed whom at a festival, you shake your heads, amused rather than wounded. The weight of judgment feels lighter when shared. You realize that love is less about impressing others and more about surviving them, standing shoulder to shoulder against the tide of endless commentary. There are days you miss the thrill of courtship, the racing heart, the stolen glances, the dizzying hope. But then you watch your beloved chase a pig across the yard, hair wild, face flushed, muttering curses so inventive the priest would faint. And you feel something even better. Not the fire of beginning, but the warmth of belonging. You know the flaws, the habits, the irritations, and still you choose each other. That, you realize, is the deeper romance. Marriage, in the end, is not grand. It is not about ballads or epic gestures. It is about bread loaves, pigs, gossip, and laughter. It is about turning survival into companionship, about finding joy in the ordinary, about knowing that when the world mocks, at least you can roll your eyes together. And as you sit at the table, breaking bread and handing over the better half, without hesitation, you understand that this, quietly and stubbornly, is love. Love endures, though no one can quite explain why. You live in a world of mud, so thick it swallows shoes, goats that chew through anything resembling dignity, and gossip so relentless it reaches the next village before you've even finished your sentence. You spend half your life smelling faintly of smoke, onions, or worse, and the other half being reminded of it by relatives who find your shortcomings endlessly entertaining. And yet, despite all of this, or perhaps because of it, romance does not die. Somehow, it flourishes. It endures in glances exchanged at the well, even when the rope snaps and drops the bucket straight into the mud. It survives in the market, where someone hands you the better carrot, despite having nothing but shriveled ones left for themselves. It sneaks into taverns, even when drowned out by drunken ballads and fights over turnip pies. It even survives the meddling of elders who loudly declare you unsuited, mismatched, or doomed, only to watch you stubbornly carry on anyway. Love here is not elegant, not noble, not worthy of gilded poetry. It is battered, messy, and covered in dirt, but it is alive. You see it in the smallest things. A hand brushing yours while stirring the same pot of stew, a laugh shared over spilled milk that soaks the rushes, a cloak held above your head during rain, though the cloak itself is so hole-ridden you might as well be standing bare. These moments do not seem like much, yet they bind tighter than gold chains. Romance becomes not about perfection, but about persistence. The willingness to endure the endless failures and indignities, to laugh when everything goes wrong, and to keep choosing each other in spite of it. Goats will always interfere. They will eat proposals, chew through ropes meant to secure your bundles, and bleat loudly in the background of every tender moment. Chickens will scatter, cows will stare, dogs will slobber, and relatives will never ever stop offering commentary. You could rage against it, curse the heavens, or swear never to try again. But still, the next day, you will find yourself at the market, trying to look appealing while clutching a turnip, hoping your beloved notices. You endure because something in you insists that even amid the absurdity, there is joy. Humor becomes your armor. You laugh when your tunic smells of onions, and your beloved pretends to swoon dramatically, clutching their chest as though overcome by romance. You laugh when the minstrel once again rhymes love with dove, and the dove itself immediately relieves itself on your shoulder. You laugh when the bed creaks so loudly that half the household cackles in unison, because what else can you do? Without humor, love would sink under the weight of mud and misery. With humor, it floats, rickety but resilient, like a raft patched together from barrels and stubbornness. You realize, slowly, that endurance is the real courtship. Anyone can blush at a festival or trip into affection over a pig, but it takes something stronger to stay when the novelty fades. To keep smiling when your beloved burns the stew again, when the roof leaks directly onto your shared bed, when winter turns every breath into smoke and you huddle together just to keep from freezing. That kind of love does not sparkle. It glows faintly, like coals beneath ash, steady and warm enough to last. It is not without doubt. There are mornings when you wonder if you have made a mistake, when the gossip feels heavier than the chores, when you dream of running away to a life with fewer goats. But then your beloved hands you the better piece of bread without hesitation, or laughs at a joke no one else heard, or presses their forehead to yours while the world outside howls with wind. In those moments, you remember why you stayed. You remember that love is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be stubborn. The village will keep watching, whispering, and retelling your story until it barely resembles the truth. They will sing about you in taverns, mispronounce your names, and embroider your life into nonsense fit for minstrels. They will decide who loved whom, who failed, who triumphed, whether you like it or not. And yet, beyond the noise, there is the quiet truth that only you and your beloved know. The truth that you endured together, that you chose each other not once but every day, even when the bread was stale and the roof leaked and your clothes reeked of onions. Perhaps that is the secret of love in your world. Not grand gestures or perfect vows, but persistence through mud, goats, and endless laughter. Not poetry written in flawless Latin, but clumsy words scratched onto scraps of parchment that still manage to mean something. Not privacy or perfection, but the comfort of someone who does not mind your stink, your clumsiness, your flaws shouted about at the well. Someone who laughs with you instead of at you when the goat eats the cabbage meant for dinner. So you endure. You hold hands in the mud, you kiss in the shadow of cows, you argue gently about pigs, and you laugh until your sides ache. You do not conquer the world. You do not escape the gossip. You do not transform your life into a ballad worth singing. But you do find love. Stubborn, messy, ridiculous love. And somehow, impossibly, that is enough.